Imagine this. You wake not to the sound of cars or the hum of a city, but to the heavy breath of the jungle. The air itself feels alive, thick, wet, humming with the slow pulse of dawn. Mist curls around the trees like spirits reluctant to leave the earth, and somewhere, far off, a drum begins to sound. A single beat, low and steady, rolling through the swamps like a heartbeat too large to belong to any one man. Before you, half buried in the soil, something stirs the fog, a vast stone face, its features worn by centuries but still fierce, eternal. The lips are full, the nose broad, the eyes carved with an authority that outlasts empires. The colossal head stares past you into a time before time. This is not a ruin. This is a witness. The Olmecs, the first great civilization of Mesoamerica, stood here more than 3,000 years ago. Long before the Maya wrote their star maps or the Aztecs raised their temples, the Olmecs were carving gods from basalt and shaping the foundations of the world to come. Their story begins in shadow. Not the absence of light, but the weight of mystery, a world where the air tasted of rain and blood, and the jungle whispered secrets no one else could hear. You walk closer to the stone head, your boots sinking into the damp earth. Its surface glistens with dew. Touch it, and you feel the faint warmth of the night it has absorbed, as though the stone still remembers the hands that shaped it. You imagine them, men with no iron tools, only obsidian blades and pounding stones, chipping for days, for months, for years. They worked by firelight and faith. Each stroke of the hammer was prayer. Each flake that fell was a piece of the king's soul, released to the stone. Archaeologists call them colossal heads, but to the people who stood here, they were more than statues. They were embodiments of power, of lineage, of the divine right to rule. You can almost hear the murmurs of the sculptors, the scrape of stone on stone, the muttered songs to the gods of rain and earth. The Olmec world was not built on war. It was born from the soil, from rivers that glisten like veins through the Gulf Coast lowlands of what is now Veracruz and Tabasco. The land was rich, fertile, and unforgiving. Swamps that swallowed men whole. Jungles that could bloom one day and rot the next. And in this chaos they found order. Their myths tell of a world made not once, but many times, destroyed and remade by gods whose tempers could split mountains. To live here was to live in conversation with power, the kind that could feed you or drown you, bless your fields or strike them barren. So the Olmecs built their cities like prayers laid out on the earth. They raised platforms above the floods, carved drainage canals through the mud, and aligned their monuments to the stars. San Lorenzo, La Venta, Tres Zapotes, each name now just a whisper of what once was a living heart of stone and fire. Imagine standing on a high platform at dawn. The horizon bleeds with light, and below, the world steams. Around you, hundreds of people move in silence, farmers, artisans, priests. They carry offerings, maize, jade beads, a bird's wing, a few drops of blood. The first sun of the day rises between two carved mounds, perfectly framed. The priests raise their hands, chanting words that no one has spoken in millennia. The jungle listens. When the Spanish first heard rumors of giant stone heads buried in the jungles of Mexico, they dismissed them as idle talk, legends of giants, perhaps, or gods of some forgotten tribe. Even centuries later, when farmers stumbled upon those heads while plowing their fields, the world refused to believe that a civilization older than the Maya had existed here. But the earth remembers. And what it remembers, it does not easily release. The first explorers who reached San Lorenzo in the 19th century described it as an archaeological fever dream. Massive basalt heads staring out of the mud, fragments of jade so finely carved they could have been the work of a jeweler, and strange motifs, jaguars, serpents, men with the faces of babies and the eyes of gods. The Olmecs had no empire in the way we imagine it. No legions, no walls, no vast cities of stone. Yet their influence spread like water through the soil. Their art, their symbols, their gods, all would echo in every civilization that came after. This was not coincidence. It was legacy. But who were they truly? The truth lies hidden in fragments, shards of pottery, carved stones, a handful of glyphs no one has yet fully read. The rest is silence and soil. Still, through that silence, a pattern emerges. The Olmecs were farmers, yes, but also engineers, traders, astronomers, sculptors. They tamed rivers with canals and dikes. They learned the moods of maize, how to coax it from the swampy ground and turn it into life. And in their ceremonies, they sought not merely to survive the world, but to speak to it. Every act was ritual, every meal an offering, every storm a message. When they looked at the jaguar, they saw not an animal, but a god, the embodiment of strength, stealth, and fertility. They carved its image into jade, painted it on walls, and birthed a mythology in which man and beast merged. Some say the Olmec rulers claimed descent from these divine creatures, half human, half jaguar, beings who could cross the boundaries between worlds. Their art shows infants with fang mouths and slitted eyes, the so-called were jaguar. Part myth, part royal propaganda, entirely mesmerizing. Imagine standing in one of their temples, the air thick with copal smoke. A priest approaches, his skin painted with streaks of black and red, the colors of dusk and blood. He holds a jade mask carved in the likeness of the jaguar, its surface cool and gleaming. When he places it upon his face, he becomes something else, not man, not God, but the bridge between. In that moment, you begin to understand what the Olmec world must have felt like, a place where the divine was not distant, but immediate. Where the gods did not reside in the heavens, but in every river, every stone, every beating heart. Step back for a moment. Look again at the colossal head before you. It is not a relic of some vanished dream. It is a portrait, the likeness of a ruler who walked these swamps when the rest of the world was still half asleep. You can almost see him now, adorned with feathers and jade, his face glistening with sweat, his people gathered before him in the steaming dawn. His kingdom stretches not in walls or armies, but in influence, in trade routes that carry obsidian from the highlands, cacao from the tropics, salt from the coast. His priests read the sky, his artisans carve jade so fine it hums when you breathe upon it. And somewhere, beneath the hum of insects and the beat of drums, there is a conviction that the world can be ordered, that chaos can be tamed, at least for a time. The Olmecs called upon gods of rain and maize, of earth and fertility. But above all, they revered the power that connects them, the pulse of life that runs beneath the soil, through the rivers, into the veins of every living thing. That belief became the root from which all later civilizations would grow. And yet, for all their mastery, they left no clear words, no written history to explain themselves. Only stone and silence. Perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all, that the first civilization of the Americas rose not to shout its name, but to whisper through its monuments, trusting that one day, someone would listen. The jungle shifts again. A breeze stirs the canopy, scattering drops of dew that glitter like sparks. The colossal head seems to breathe. Behind it, faint trails lead deeper into the green, toward rivers that once bore rafts heavy with basalt, toward mounds that hide forgotten plazas beneath the trees. Follow them. The drums call again, softer now, fading into the distance. The mist thickens. Somewhere ahead lies the beginning, the first village that rose beside a river, where the story of the Olmec people truly began. And so, through the fog and the sound of rain, we step back further, into the origins of a people. The jungle exhales as you walk. The air is damp and heavy, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant rain. Each footstep sinks slightly into the soil, soft, dark, alive. Somewhere above, a toucan croaks, its call strange and prehistoric. Beneath the layered hum of insects, you can almost hear the low murmur of water. It draws you forward deeper, where the trees part to reveal a slow-moving river the color of obsidian and honey. This is where it began. Long before the pyramids of Teotihuacan pierced the sky, before Maya cities bloomed like stone gardens, before the Aztec Empire shimmered on its lake. Here, along these rivers, a people began to shape the world that would give birth to all of them. The year, if one must give it such a name, is around 1500 BC. The Olmec world is waking. The land is neither kind nor cruel, merely vast. To the west lies the Tuxtla Mountains, their peaks hidden beneath clouds that weep endlessly into the valleys below. To the east, the Gulf of Mexico, a restless body breathing out salt and mist. Between them stretches a maze of rivers, the Coatzacoalcos, the San Juan, the Tenala, winding like serpents through jungles so thick the sunlight dissolves before reaching the ground. It is here, in these humid lowlands, that small communities begin to gather on patches of dry ground raised above the floods. At first, they are little more than clusters of huts woven from reeds, each standing on stilts against the encroaching water. But look closer, there is order in this simplicity. Fires burn in hearths shaped not by chance, but by pattern. Clay figurines dry beside them, molded by careful hands, faces serene, eyes closed as if dreaming of the gods. These are the first villages of the Olmec heartland. The people who built them were not yet kings or priests. They were farmers, hunters, traders, ordinary souls bound by an extraordinary landscape. They spoke in early tongues whose echoes have long since vanished, but their gestures were timeless. The sweep of an arm to point out the river's bend, the tilt of a head to mark the change in wind. Imagine their days. At dawn, they rise to the hiss of insects and the distant cry of howler monkeys. The air smells of wet ash and maize. The women tend the fires, grinding corn on flat stones called metates, their rhythm steady as breathing, the first song of civilization. The men slip silently into the jungle, carrying out ladles, those ingenious spear throwers that can send a dart slicing through the undergrowth with the speed of a striking snake. By noon, the world is drenched in heat. The sun turns the swamp's surface into liquid gold, and everything slows, even the birds fall silent. The villagers retreat to shade, their huts open to the breeze. Children chase each other through puddles, their laughter mingling with the droning of cicadas. And then the afternoon storms arrive, thick, sudden, biblical. Sheets of rain hammer the thatched roofs. Lightning turns the sky white. The rivers rise and swell, brown and churning, gnawing at their banks. Yet the people do not flee. They know this rhythm. They live within it. The water brings death and life in equal measure. When the storm passes, the world smells new again. The villagers emerge to tend their fields, milpas, carved from the jungle itself. Here grows maize, still small and fragile in this early age, its kernels thin and pale. Around it they plant beans, squash, chili. Together they form a trinity, food that nourishes, sustains, and binds communities. In time, this abundance allows something miraculous to happen: specialization. Not everyone must hunt or farm. Some begin to craft. One man, perhaps an elder with patient hands, learns to shape clay into forms that seem to breathe. Another discovers that if he buries a shell in a fire long enough, it turns soft enough to carve. A woman learns to weave rushes into baskets strong enough to carry stones. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, a society takes shape, one where beauty and utility intertwine. But no culture rises on full stomachs alone. Something else begins to grow among them, a sense of connection between their world and the unseen forces that rule it. They begin to look at the sky differently. At night, when the storm clouds part, the stars blaze over the jungle, cold, infinite. The villagers notice that the same constellations return with the seasons. The Pleiades rise when the maize sprouts. Orion sinks when the rains fade. Coincidence, perhaps, but to them, it feels like a conversation. The rivers whisper one language, the stars another. The people learn to listen to both. Soon, small rituals take shape. Offerings of food are left at the water's edge, maize dough shaped into faces, blood from a cut finger, a carved figurine set adrift on the current. Smoke curls upward from fires at dusk, carrying prayers into the canopy. The villagers speak of spirits in the stones, gods in the rain, beasts that walk between worlds. One story, perhaps, tells of a great serpent who lives beneath the river, his scales made of jade, his breath the monsoon. Another of a jaguar mother, who prowls the night to guard her cubs, and by extension, their people. Myth becomes language. Language becomes memory. And memory, that most human of inventions, is the beginning of history. Generations pass. The villages grow. A mound of earth rises here, another there, not by accident, but by design. The people begin to shape the land itself, lifting their homes above the floods, carving terraces, marking sacred space. These mounds will one day form the foundations of the first true Olmec centers, places like San Lorenzo and La Venta. But for now, they are still humble. You can walk among them. Hear the scrape of a child's laughter, the call of a mother at dusk. Smell the wood smoke curling through the trees. The air is thick with promise. Somewhere, a leader begins to emerge, not a king yet, but a man whose voice carries weight. Perhaps he is a skilled hunter who can read the jungle like scripture. Perhaps he speaks with the gods in dreams. People bring him offerings, a carved shell, a handful of maize, a bright green stone pulled from the riverbed. He accepts them with quiet gravity. Power, after all, begins not with conquest, but with belief. And belief is gathering like storm clouds. One evening, as the sun sinks and the world turns amber, you sit with them around a fire. The light flickers over their faces, turning sweat to gold. Someone beats a drum, slow, steady, echoing the heart of the jungle. Another begins to chant, words rising and falling like waves. You don't understand the language, but you feel its weight. It is a song of origin, of beginnings. They sing of a time when the world was mud and darkness, when the gods shaped men from clay but the rain washed them away. They sing of the first maize plant that sprouted from the body of a fallen hero. They sing of the jaguar, the rain, the serpent, the earth, the four corners of the world, the breath of the sky. And as the song fades, the jungle answers, a chorus of frogs, the whisper of wind, the sigh of water against the reeds. The people sit in silence, eyes reflecting the firelight. In that stillness, you realize this is how civilizations are born, not from conquest or invention, but from shared imagination. From the belief that the world can be understood, shaped, mirrored in the human hand. By 1400 BC, those hands have begun to build wonders. They quarry basalt from distant mountains, each block 100 times the weight of a man, and drag it across miles of swamp. They shape it into altars, thrones, colossal heads. How? The question lingers even now. No beasts of burden, no wheels, no iron. Only muscle, will, and a kind of devotion that blurs the line between labor and worship. Imagine the sight, hundreds of workers hauling a single stone on log rollers, chanting in rhythm as they move. The air thick with humidity, the ground trembling beneath their feet. They do not work for coin, but for eternity, for the promise that this monument will stand when their names are forgotten. At night, they rest beside the river, the stone looming above them like a sleeping god. The stars shimmer on its surface, and someone, a priest perhaps, steps forward to pour water over it, whispering words that sound like gratitude. The Olmec heartland becomes a theater of transformation. What was once jungle and swamp becomes a landscape of meaning, terraces shaped to mimic sacred mountains, plazas aligned with celestial paths, rivers redirected to form boundaries between the world of men and that of spirits. San Lorenzo, perched on a natural plateau, grows into the first true ceremonial center. Its rulers sit on carved thrones, half hidden in shadow. Around them, craftsmen create objects of jade and serpentine, their colors shimmering between green and blue like water caught in sunlight. These objects are not mere adornments. They are vessels of power, symbols of divine favor. La Venta rises next, its layout more deliberate, more cosmic. Mounds arranged along precise axes, plazas oriented to the movements of the sun. It is as if the people are attempting to mirror heaven upon the earth, to make their cities living calendars, instruments for speaking to the gods. Yet even as they build upward, the Olmecs never forget the ground beneath them. Their gods remain of the earth, born from water, clay, and blood. Rituals deepen. Priests learn the art of sacrifice, maize first, then animals, then, perhaps, humans. Each offering is a dialogue, a plea, a negotiation with the forces that sustain them. There are signs of this devotion everywhere archaeologists have dug: small jade figurines buried in clusters, serpentine masks laid carefully in the soil, the remains of altars whose surfaces are worn smooth by centuries of touch. But what matters most is not what they gave, but why they gave it. The Olmecs saw the world as a living thing, one that demanded respect, and occasionally appeasement. Every drought, every flood, every failed crop was not mere chance. It was imbalance, a rift between human duty and divine expectation. To restore harmony, one must give back a piece of life itself. Over centuries, the Olmec world expands like ripples in water. Trade routes stretch across the land: jade from the Motagua Valley, obsidian from the highlands, salt from the coast, feathers from distant jungles. Villages become towns, towns become centers of ritual and commerce. Ideas flow along with goods. A carving style born in one valley appears hundreds of miles away. Symbols spread, a jaguar here, a maize god there, until the entire region hums with shared iconography. The Olmec way becomes the template for civilization itself in Mesoamerica. And still, they remain shrouded in mystery. To outsiders, even modern ones, they seem to appear fully formed, like a dream from the earth. We find their sculptures but not their words, their altars but not their chronicles. They built cities, yet we know neither their kings' names nor their battles. They invented writing, perhaps, but left us only a handful of symbols still undeciphered. It is as though they spoke to the future in riddles, trusting that understanding would one day catch up. The night deepens around you as you walk through their world. The air hums with frogs and distant thunder. In the darkness, you can see faint shapes, the outlines of mounds, the glimmer of wet stone. The colossal head you saw at the beginning seems far away now, but its gaze lingers in your mind. The Olmecs are no longer shadows. They are voices, faint, ancient, but unmistakably human. You can hear them in the rustle of leaves, in the lap of water against stone. You pause beside the river once more. Fireflies drift above its surface like stars fallen to earth. Across the water, you glimpse the faint glow of another settlement, fires flickering beneath palm roofs, figures moving in silhouette. That light, that fragile thread of civilization, will one day ignite the brilliance of the Maya, the strength of the Zapotecs, the splendor of the Aztecs. But here, it is still new, still tender, still wrapped in the breath of the jungle. You take a final look at the river, the huts, the quiet people moving through the mist. Their voices fade into the rhythm of the night. And as the moon rises, pale and heavy over the swamps, you realize you are standing not at the edge of history, but at its very beginning. The drums start again, slow, distant, like a heartbeat calling you onward. Ahead lies a new horizon, the land itself, its swamps, its storms, its generosity and its cruelty, waiting to be shaped by human hands. And so, without turning back, you walk into the land and the swamps, where the world of the Olmecs truly takes root. We will not pause. We will only breathe, just as the jungle breathes. The last notes of the drums still tremble in the night air as we walk onward, the mist clinging to our skin. The colossal head and the first villages fade behind us, swallowed by shadow and vine. Ahead, the land itself begins to reveal its secrets. The same land that made the Olmecs who they were, that tested them, fed them, and ultimately gave their world its soul. You feel it before you see it. The weight of humidity thickens, as though the air itself has substance, a liquid that clings to your lungs. Every sound is magnified here. The croak of frogs, the whistle of unseen birds, the slow sigh of wind moving through reeds that stand taller than a man. Beneath your feet, the ground gives slightly, spongy, soaked through with centuries of rain. The jungle hums not with silence but with life, 1,000 heartbeats, 1,000 hidden movements in the undergrowth. This is Olmen, the land of the rubber trees, the heartland of the Olmecs. From the air, if one could ever rise above it, it would look like a patchwork of green and gold, rivers like dark snakes winding through forest and marsh, lagoons glimmering like shards of obsidian, volcanic hills rising from the plain like islands of stone. But down here, at ground level, it feels infinite, a living maze of moisture and light. The people who thrived here did so not by conquering it, but by learning its moods. The jungle is a teacher, but not a gentle one. It offers abundance, yes, fruit, fish, fertile soil, but it demands respect. The Olmecs learned early that survival here was a kind of conversation. You could not force the land to yield. You had to coax it, flatter it, offer something in return. That was the first Olmec wisdom: the earth is alive. You follow a narrow trail, its edges lined with thick ferns. The path leads down to a swampy plain. The air smells of rot and sweetness, decaying leaves, river mud, flowers that bloom for a single day. At the center, a pool of water reflects the pale light of the moon. It looks calm, but look closer. Tiny bubbles rise constantly from below. The earth here never rests. It was in places like this that the Olmecs learned the delicate art of transformation. They discovered that if they cut into the bark of a certain tree, the Castilla elastica, the rubber tree, a milky sap would flow out, sticky and white. They mixed it with the juice of another vine, the Ipomoea alba, and something miraculous happened. The mixture turned to a substance that bounced, stretched, and resisted the decay of the jungle. It was the birth of rubber, the first in human history. Imagine the scene: an Olmec craftsman kneeling by the fire, stirring a pot filled with the steaming mixture. The flames flicker against his face. He lifts a handful of the liquid and lets it drip back, watching it thicken. When it cools, he molds it into a sphere, then drops it to the ground. It bounces. The gathered crowd laughs, amazed. To them, this is no toy. It is something divine, elastic like life itself, resilient like the gods who endure through flood and drought. From this single discovery would come one of the most sacred rituals in all Mesoamerica, the rubber ball game. But that story lies further ahead. For now, remember this: in the Olmec world, even play began as a prayer to the earth. As dawn returns, the landscape changes color. The swamp mists rise, glowing pink in the newborn sun. Birds explode into the air, their wings flashing blue and green. Somewhere nearby, the river roars softly, wide, dark, and slow-moving, heavy with silt. You walk toward it, and with every step, the ground grows firmer. The smell of wet clay gives way to the scent of life, maize fields. Here the Olmecs carved islands of order from chaos. They built raised fields, layers of mud and vegetation stacked high enough to stay above floodwaters. In the channels between, fish swam, snails bred, and water lilies bloomed. The people gathered both food and fertilizer from these channels, creating a cycle so efficient it would feed generations. Imagine standing on one of these fields, your feet sinking slightly into the damp soil. A woman bends nearby, her arms dusted with pollen, planting maize in neat rows. Her children laugh as they chase a dog along the embankment. Behind her, smoke curls from a cooking fire. The day's first meal is being prepared: maize cakes, roasted fish, beans simmering in clay pots. You inhale, and the air tastes of wood smoke, sweat, and salt from the nearby sea. The Olmecs were not strangers to the coast. The Gulf lay only a few days' walk away, and its influence reached deep inland. Traders carried shells, salt, fish, and coral along the rivers, their canoes gliding through mangrove channels alive with herons and crocodiles. The rhythm of the tides shaped their sense of time. The salt smell of the sea clung even to inland villages, reminding them that all waters eventually meet. They learned to move with those waters, to build where the floods could not take them, to plant when the rains promised life. Their lives followed the pulse of the land so closely that when the earth trembled, they saw not disaster but divine breath. The world was alive, shifting, and they were part of its motion. Step away from the river and into the high ground. The air cools slightly, carrying the scent of volcanic stone. Here the land rises into ridges and plateaus. The soil is rich, almost black, born from ash long cooled. The Tuxtla Mountains stand watch to the west, their peaks veiled in perpetual mist. It was from these ancient volcanoes that the Olmecs drew their mightiest material, basalt. Hard, heavy, stubborn stone. Imagine hauling a 40-ton block of it across 30 miles of swamp with nothing but wooden sleds, rope, and human strength. Yet they did it again and again. The quarries at El Vigia and Cerro Sintepec still bear the marks of their labor. Half-finished sculptures abandoned mid-carving, as if the workers simply vanished one afternoon and the jungle swallowed the rest. From these stones came not only the colossal heads, but thrones, altars, even drains, the arteries of their sacred cities. The Olmecs learned to make the land serve not as a backdrop but as a partner in creation. They sculpted water to flow where they wanted it, built terraces that mirrored the shape of distant hills, arranged their plazas to echo the horizon. Every mound, every canal, every stone, a conversation with the landscape. To the Olmecs, the land was not inert. It was a body, a being, immense and breathing. Mountains were its bones. Rivers were its veins. Swamps were its sweat, fertile, nourishing, eternal. To live here was to live inside the body of the earth itself. But there was danger too, and they knew it well. The same rains that fed their crops could turn violent without warning. The rivers swelled, drowning whole fields. Crocodiles came with the floods, their eyes glinting like jewels in the dark water. Mosquitoes carried fevers that could sweep through villages silently, leaving only stillness behind. Even the ground was treacherous. The wet season softened it until it moved like flesh, swallowing anything that stayed too long in one place. The Olmecs learned to build light, to move when the earth demanded it, to accept loss as part of living. And still they stayed. Because beneath all the danger lay fertility, an abundance no mountain plateau could match. The soil here was a promise written in mud. Each year the floods receded, leaving behind a layer of silt so rich that even the poorest seeds grew tall. To abandon it would have been to abandon the favor of the gods themselves. So they adapted. They built drainage systems long before engineers had names for such things. Canals wound through their settlements, guiding floodwaters back to the rivers. The land that once drowned them now fed them. From that mastery grew confidence, and from confidence, civilization. The swamps shaped not only their cities but their imagination. In the shifting reflections of water, they saw the boundary between worlds, the place where sky met earth, where the living could glimpse the divine. Many of their sculptures, carved from jade or serpentine, seemed to capture that liminal moment, faces that are half human, half animal, infants whose mouths curve into the snarl of a jaguar, gods whose eyes seem to flicker between this world and another. Water was transformation. And the swamp, that mirror of heaven and hell alike, was where transformation began. Priests would come to these wetlands at dawn, their skin painted blue for the sky, their robes damp with dew. They carried offerings wrapped in palm leaves, maize dough, feathers, perhaps a drop of their own blood. Kneeling by the edge of the water, they whispered prayers to the rain god, the Olmec ancestor of Chak and Tlaloc, asking that his storms bring mercy, not ruin. Sometimes they cast figurines into the water, believing that the ripples carried their words to the underworld below. Archaeologists have found such offerings, delicate faces, polished axes of jade, once gleaming green before the mud dulled them. To the Olmecs, jade was not simply beauty. It was life, solidified breath. Its color was the color of young maize, of rebirth after rain. When you hold a piece of jade, smooth and cool, you can almost feel the heartbeat of that ancient faith. By midday, the jungle quiets again, wrapped in heat. You sit beneath a ceiba tree, vast, sacred, its roots twisting above the ground like the limbs of sleeping serpents. In Olmec belief, the ceiba was the axis of the world, its branches piercing the heavens, its roots sinking into the underworld. It connects everything, the living, the dead, the divine. The Olmecs must have sat as you do now, staring up through its canopy, watching the sunlight flicker through the leaves like the scales of some great serpent. They would have seen not branches but pathways, roads for spirits, bridges between realms. When lightning struck such a tree, it was not destruction but revelation, the gods speaking in light. Everywhere in this landscape, the boundaries blur, between land and water, between man and animal, between life and death. To live here was to exist always on the threshold of something larger. That, perhaps, is what gave the Olmecs their depth, the sense that every moment, every breath, was part of a grander rhythm. As evening falls, you make your way toward one of their early centers, San Lorenzo, perhaps, or its ancestor. The air thickens again with the smell of river and fire. You hear laughter, the crackle of cooking, the soft beat of drums. The settlement rises gently from the plain, not a city of stone, but of earth and order. Mounds form terraces, houses sit in measured lines. In the fading light, you can see men working near the water, repairing canoes, while others tend to the canals that feed the fields. A group of women sit near the fire, their hair glistening with oil. One of them holds a child who toys with a clay whistle shaped like a bird. The sound it makes is plaintive, haunting, almost human. Nearby, a small shrine of stones marks a sacred spot, perhaps the heart of the community. There, a priest pours liquid over a carved face. You recognize it, the jaguar, again and again, always the jaguar. Its power is everywhere, the hunter, the protector, the night itself. As darkness falls, the air fills with the chorus of frogs and insects. Fires burn low, glowing like constellations across the land. Above them, the real constellations begin to shimmer. The same stars the Olmecs once read, the same slow dance of heaven mirrored in their canals below. It is said that they aligned their mounds and plazas with these celestial paths, not merely to honor the gods, but to synchronize their lives with the universe itself. To the Olmecs, the cosmos was not a distant sky. It was a pattern woven through the very soil. When the stars shifted, they planted. When they vanished, they prayed. And so their calendar, rudimentary but precise, was born not from calculation, but from observation. They lived by the pulse of the world. You sit there a long while, listening. The swamp breathes, the land hums, and you feel an old truth settle into you, that civilization is not built on conquest, but on relationship. The Olmecs did not tame the jungle. They befriended it. Their genius was not domination, but dialogue. They learned how to balance themselves between earth and sky, to take without greed, to give without fear. Their monuments were not defiance, but gratitude in stone. Even their gods were reflections of nature's moods, the rain's gentleness and rage, the sun's mercy and cruelty, the jaguar's grace and hunger. And perhaps that is why their world feels so alive, even now. The ruins may have crumbled, the forests returned, but the rhythm remains, a whisper under every leaf, a memory in the mud. You look out across the flooded plain. Fireflies rise from the reeds like sparks from invisible fires. Somewhere out there, the next generation of Olmec builders will begin raising their sacred centers higher, carving gods from stone, shaping the pattern that will outlive them all. The river glows faintly in the moonlight, winding through the darkness like a living vein. Its surface shimmers, reflecting the stars. You realize that for the Olmecs, this was the world entire, heaven above, earth below, and between them, the eternal mirror of water. You take a breath, deep, humid, alive. Tomorrow, The Olmecs will turn this relationship with the land into power and order, into kingship and ceremony, into cities that hum with divine architecture. But for now, as the night settles heavy over the swamps, the story rests in balance, between human hands and the living earth that shaped them. The drums begin again, soft as thunder in the distance, calling you forward into the next vision of their world. Let's not break stride. The drums are still faint behind us, their rhythm absorbed by the trees, fading into the slow heartbeat of the jungle. The night is warm, the air wet and still. We walk along the river's edge where the fireflies drift like embers, and before us, something new is rising from the mist, not the humble huts of the early farmers, but the first outlines of power. Morning comes heavy and gold. The air smells of river clay, smoke, and maize roasting on coals. The swamp has quieted. Even the frogs seem to pause, as though waiting. Across the plain, mounds rise like the backs of sleeping giants. Between them, straight avenues cut through the grass, lines too precise to be the work of chance. You are standing before one of the first great ceremonial centers of Mesoamerica, San Lorenzo. It's early still. Mist clings to the low ground and curls around the bases of the mounds. From a distance, the settlement looks like a natural rise, an island in a sea of green. But climb closer and you'll see the truth. This hill was built layer upon layer of earth carried by human hands, shaped into terraces, platforms, and broad plazas. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, must have labored here. Every shovel of soil, every block of stone, a declaration that the earth itself could be tamed, shaped, ordered. The Olmecs have crossed the threshold. This is no longer just survival. It is civilization. Walk through the settlement slowly. The hum of daily life surrounds you, distant hammering where craftsmen chip at basalt, the rustle of palm leaves as women weave mats, the laughter of children chasing each other through the dust. But beneath it all is another sound, the low murmur of authority. A man walks through the plaza, his shoulders draped in jaguar pelts, a collar of jade beads at his throat. His head is bound from childhood, flattened and elongated, a living symbol of status. People step aside as he passes, heads bowed. He doesn't look at them, not out of cruelty, but ritual. His gaze is reserved for the gods. He is a ruler, though the Olmecs would have called him something far more sacred, not a king in the mortal sense, but a bridge between worlds. The power he carries is not merely political, it is divine. His word is the echo of thunder, his blood a channel to the rain god, his breath the breath of the maize spirit. To be a leader in Olmec lands was to stand halfway between man and God, a role of awe and terror. You follow him into the heart of the city, where a broad court opens between two earthen mounds. Here stands one of San Lorenzo's wonders, a colossal head newly carved, its features stern, its eyes narrow beneath a heavy brow. Workers still polish its surface with sand and water, their arms glistening with sweat. Each stroke brings the stone to life. The head is immense, nearly 3 meters tall, weighing many tons. The basalt was dragged from quarries 30 miles away, floated on rafts down swollen rivers, then hauled by ropes and rollers up to this very spot. Whose face is this? You ask, though no one answers. It is not just a portrait, it is a proclamation. Each head is believed to depict a ruler, immortalized in stone, his helmet-like crown marking him as both warrior and priest. These faces stare eternally across the plazas as if still overseeing ceremonies, watching that the order they forged is never broken. Imagine the awe these monuments inspired. To the farmers and fishers who lived nearby, they were proof that their leaders could move mountains, could command the earth itself to kneel. But there is another layer to this spectacle. The colossal heads do not merely represent individuals. They assert control, the physical manifestation of hierarchy. A society capable of carving, transporting, and erecting such stones must be tightly organized, its labor meticulously directed. This is how power begins, not in war, but in coordination. Follow the ruler now. He ascends a slope toward the highest terrace, where the view opens over the entire plain. Here, the wind cools the sweat on your skin. From this height, you can see the river glinting like a silver serpent, and beyond it, the dark sprawl of the jungle. Around him, attendants spread woven mats. Priests kneel, their bodies painted in swirling patterns of black and red. The ruler raises his arms to the sky. A hush falls. Even the birds seem to hold their breath. Smoke curls upward from censers of burning copal resin, thick and sweet. Drums begin, slow, steady, the same rhythm you've been following since the night began. A priest steps forward with a stingray spine, sharp and glistening, and offers it to the ruler. Without flinching, he presses it against his own skin. A thin line of blood wells up, dark as the earth. The crowd murmurs prayers. This act, bloodletting, is no mere sacrifice. It is communication. The ruler's blood, they believe, nourishes the gods as rain nourishes maize. Through this offering, he ensures the balance of the world. The floods will come but not destroy, the sun will return, the maize will grow. Order is not enforced by law, it is maintained through ritual. The leader suffers so that the people may live. The wind carries the scent of blood and resin. The drums quicken, echoing across the terraces. You feel it in your chest, in your ribs, in the ground itself. For a moment, you understand why they believed power was sacred. It was not cruelty or control. It was responsibility, the terrible burden of standing between life and chaos. Down below, life moves with the same rhythm. Artisans craft ornaments from jade and serpentine. Their workshops are small, lit by filtered sunlight. The sound of chipping stone fills the air like rain. Each artisan belongs to a lineage of craftsmen whose skills are both trade and priesthood. They carve masks, figurines, and pendants that reflect the hierarchy of their world. Rulers and priests wear the image of the war jaguar, half human, half feline, on their chests and belts. This creature, born of myth and shamanic vision, embodies transformation, the ability to shift between human and divine, between waking and dreaming. To become a leader is to become the jaguar. To command men is to command the boundary between worlds. The artisan's tools are simple: stone chisels, obsidian flakes, sand for polishing. But in their hands, raw materials become symbols of eternity. The sheen of jade, the weight of basalt, the deep green of serpentine, all carry meanings layered like the jungle itself. To wear jade is to wear life. To hold obsidian is to hold night. To carve stone is to claim the right to endure. At dusk, the city transforms. The last light spills across the terraces, turning the river red. The ruler descends from the temple mound, followed by his attendants. Below, fires are lit across the plaza. People gather with baskets of food, maize cakes, tamales filled with beans and peppers, gourds of fermented cacao. Tonight is a festival, a celebration of the rain's return, the renewal of the sacred order. The air fills with the scent of roasting maize and the sound of flutes carved from bone. Dancers appear, their bodies painted, their faces masked as jaguars, serpents, and eagles. They move in circles, their feet stamping the earth in rhythm with the drums. Sparks rise into the night. You notice how every movement, every gesture, mirrors the cycles of nature: planting, harvest, death, rebirth. The dance is not mere entertainment, it is the living memory of the cosmos. At the center of the plaza, a low altar stands, a great slab of basalt carved with the image of a man emerging from the mouth of a jaguar. His arms are outstretched, his eyes closed. Around him swirl glyphs and patterns that seem to pulse in the firelight. This altar, scholars will one day say, represents the ruler's role as mediator, the one who passes between worlds to ensure harmony. But tonight you need no translation. You can feel it. Every drumbeat, every flicker of flame, is an affirmation that the world is in balance because someone bears its weight. The Olmec understanding of order was cosmic, not bureaucratic. Their laws were not written on clay tablets, but carved into the pattern of the world itself. When the rains came too early, it meant the gods were displeased. When the river flooded, perhaps the ruler had failed in his duties. Balance was a living thing, easily disturbed, constantly renewed through ritual and reverence. From this worldview flowed a hierarchy that was both spiritual and practical. At its heart stood the ruler-priest, the living axis of heaven and earth. Below him were nobles, artisans, traders. Beneath them, the farmers and laborers who sustained it all. Yet even they were not powerless. In giving their labor, they participated in the sacred order. Every canal they dug, every mound they raised, was part of the great conversation between humanity and the divine. The Olmecs understood something profound. Power is not a possession, it is a rhythm. It must move, circulate, renew itself, or it becomes corruption. Perhaps that is why their rulers built monuments not to themselves but to continuity, heads of stone that stare endlessly, not in vanity, but in vigilance. Night deepens. The firelight flickers over the colossal faces. Smoke hangs low, mingling with mist. The festival wanes, leaving the plaza quiet. You wander among the monuments, feeling their presence like the breath of giants. The moonlight reveals details you hadn't noticed before, faint carvings on the back of the heads, glyphs perhaps, or marks of dedication. Their meanings are lost, but their intent remains clear, permanence. In a world of mud and rain, the Olmecs sought eternity in stone. Nearby, a priest walks the perimeter of the plaza, sprinkling water and whispering prayers. You follow him to a smaller structure half hidden among trees. Inside, flickering torchlight reveals carvings of human figures floating among swirling serpents, visions of an underworld both frightening and beautiful. This is a shrine, a place where rulers come to commune with ancestors and gods. Offerings lie on the floor, jade beads, shells, and feathers. The air smells of damp stone and incense. The priest kneels, pressing his palms to the ground. His voice rises and falls softly, like wind through reeds. He is reminding the spirits of their duty, to guard the city, to protect the order, to keep the floods at bay. You realize then that for the Olmecs, religion and politics were not separate realms but the same fabric, woven tight. Governance was ritual, ritual was governance. To rule was to pray. As centuries pass, this system solidifies. San Lorenzo flourishes for hundreds of years. Its rulers oversee vast networks of trade, bringing jade from distant valleys, obsidian from the highlands, iron ore from mirrors that gleam like dark pools. These goods flow through the hands of merchants and craftsmen, fueling both wealth and wonder. But with power comes tension. Rival centers rise. La Venta to the east, Tres Zapotes to the west. Each claims divine favor, each builds monuments to prove it. For a time, they coexist, connected by trade, by shared gods and ceremonies. Yet beneath the harmony runs an undercurrent of competition. Power, even when sacred, is never still. One day, San Lorenzo's river changes course, perhaps through flood, perhaps through human miscalculation. Canals silt up. Fields drown. The city's lifeblood falters. Priests speak of omens, of angered gods. The people begin to drift away, carrying their traditions to new lands. But the order does not die, it migrates. La Venta rises as San Lorenzo fades, building higher mounds, grander altars, more intricate symbols. The divine kingship continues, refined and exalted. Even decline becomes part of the cosmic rhythm, death feeding birth, destruction giving way to renewal. By the time the stars wheel overhead and dawn begins to pale the eastern sky, the jungle is quiet again. Smoke from dying fires curls upward, mingling with mist. The colossal heads stare on, their expressions unchanging. You stand in the plaza one last time. The earth beneath you feels alive, pulsing faintly with memory. Power still hums here, not the kind that conquers, but the kind that connects. The Olmecs built their order not through swords or empires, but through belief, the conviction that the universe itself could be mirrored in human action, that every harvest and every ceremony was part of the same divine geometry. They understood what many later civilizations would forget, that true power is not domination, but harmony. The first light breaks over the horizon. The mist glows gold. Somewhere, deep in the forest, a conch shell blows, long and low, summoning priests to morning prayer. You turn toward the sound. The river glints between the trees, flowing endlessly eastward to the sea. The drums begin again, softer now, guiding you onward. Beyond the city, the jungle swallows the path. The air smells once more of rain and earth and possibility. Ahead lies another mystery, the stones themselves, carved not only with faces of kings but with creatures of myth, jaguars with human eyes, serpents with feathers, beings that crawl from clouds and dive into rivers. They are calling you forward into the next realm of the Olmec imagination, art and symbols, where belief takes shape and spirit becomes visible. And so, without pause, you follow the drums deeper into the dawn. The morning is thick with mist again. The air is cool and heavy, and the earth feels damp beneath your feet. You hear a river somewhere close by, slow and wide, its surface steaming where sunlight strikes it. The light comes in slanted rays through the canopy, pale gold diffused into silver, and there, half buried in shadow, rises a face. At first, it seems to be a hillock, an oddly shaped boulder crusted with moss. Then the mist clears just enough for you to see the curve of a cheek, the outline of lips, the broad flare of a nose carved so skillfully it might have been molded by the earth itself. Eyes look out, not with expression, but with endurance. A stone head, 10 feet tall. 40 tons of volcanic basalt, quarried miles away and hauled here by human hands over swamp and river, through jungle and floodplain. You stand before one of the greatest enigmas in all of human history, the Olmec colossal heads. The jungle hums quietly around you, but the air near the head feels different, denser, almost electric. You approach slowly. The surface of the stone is pitted by time, but when you touch it, it is still smooth beneath your fingers, faintly warm from the morning sun. Each head is unique. Each one bears a distinct face, different lips, different jawlines, different eyes. The features are broad and powerful, rendered with a precision that still humbles modern sculptors. Thick helmets crown them, some simple bands, others carved with elaborate motifs. These are not generic gods or anonymous ancestors. They are individuals, rulers, kings immortalized in stone. You imagine the day one of these heads was revealed to the world for the first time, thousands of years ago. The workmen would have gathered around it, covered in sweat and river mud, their chests heaving from weeks, perhaps months, of labor. The priests would have sung prayers to the mountain spirits, thanking them for yielding the stone. And somewhere nearby, the living ruler himself would have stood, gazing upon his own likeness with a strange mix of pride and fear, knowing he now shared his face with eternity. The sheer audacity of it is staggering. Consider what it meant to carve one of these giants without metal, without beasts of burden, without the wheel. Every mark on the stone is the result of endurance. Hammerstones striking basalt thousands of times, the rhythm of work and sweat and song. Each blow was both craftsmanship and devotion. It began at the quarry. The Olmecs sought their basalt in the volcanic highlands, places like Cerro Sintepec in the Tuxtla Mountains. There, they split the boulders with fire and water, heating them until they cracked, then dousing them so the fractures deepened. Once freed, the stones were roughly shaped, then lashed to wooden sledges and dragged downhill toward the floodplains. The logistics alone boggle the mind. Teams of workers, dozens, maybe hundreds, hauling a single block over wet terrain, laying logs as rollers, pulling in rhythm to chants. Every river crossing meant a new problem: how to keep 40 tons of stone from sinking into mud. They lashed rafts together from giant tree trunks, built bridges of reeds and vines, waited for the right season when the water ran high but not wild. And when at last they reached the site, San Lorenzo, La Venta, Tres Zapotes, the sculptors began their long communion with the stone. Day after day, the ring of hammer against basalt echoed across the plains. Fine shaping was done with obsidian flakes, smoothed by sand and water. The sculptors worked in teams, guided by master artisans who had inherited the secrets of proportion and form from generations before them. They did not carve quickly. They carved precisely. A head could take months, perhaps years, to complete. When finished, it would be placed in a ceremonial court, facing outward, always outward, as though guarding the city, its gaze fixed on the horizon where heaven met earth. You walk among them now. There are 17 known colossal heads in the world today, scattered across Mexico, each one a survivor of centuries of erosion, earthquakes, and human forgetfulness. Some rest half buried in soil, others stand in museums, polished by light. But here, in the story's living memory, they all still stand together, immense and solemn beneath the canopy. Their scale is overwhelming, but it's their individuality that truly holds you. Each head is a portrait. Each face carries emotion, however subtle, the faint downturn of a mouth, the proud lift of a chin, the trace of fatigue in heavy lids. You can see the humanity behind the ideal. These were not abstract symbols. They were men who lived, who ruled, who breathed in this same humid air. Their helmets, often mistaken for military gear, were probably ceremonial, perhaps part of the sacred ballgame uniform. They marked the rulers not just as leaders of war, but as players in a cosmic ritual. To govern was to participate in the eternal game between life and death, sky and underworld. Some scholars believe the colossal heads were carved from older monuments, altars perhaps, or thrones, repurposed after a ruler's death. Imagine that, the stone seat where a king once presided over his court transformed, after his passing, into his own memorial. The living throne becomes the immortal face. A circle completed. There is poetry in that. You kneel beside one of them, let's say the great head of La Venta, its cheeks streaked with moss. The base is half swallowed by earth, roots curling around it like the hands of time. You brush your fingers across its lips, rough and cool. What did it mean, you wonder, to the people who once stood here? When they gazed upon these giants, did they see rulers watching over them, or gods descended to earth? Did they come in reverence or fear? Did children play near their feet, or were they forbidden ground, holy as the heart of a temple? The truth is blurred by centuries, but one thing is certain: the colossal heads were symbols of authority, authority vast enough to marshal hundreds of workers, authority divine enough to justify carving a mountain into a man. They were also messages, eternal and political. Each one said, this was our leader. This was our order. This was our world. But these monuments were not built in isolation. They were part of a grander design, a choreography of power woven into the cities themselves. Walk a little farther and you'll see how the colossal heads align with plazas, altars, and mounds. They are placed not randomly, but deliberately, facing cardinal directions or significant landmarks. Some look toward rivers, others toward the mountains where the stone was born. Their placement was both geographic and spiritual. The Olmecs understood that orientation mattered, that the world had a shape, a balance that could be mirrored on Earth. The heads were anchors in this cosmic geometry, fixing the human realm to the divine grid above. You can almost feel it, an invisible web connecting head to altar, altar to mound, mound to star. The city itself becomes a map of the cosmos, and the colossal heads are its living markers. Let's imagine one of these ceremonies in full. It is midday. The plaza shimmers with heat. The air tastes of smoke and salt. The ruler stands before his own image carved in stone, draped in jaguar skins, his wrists heavy with jade. Around him gather priests, dancers, and attendants, their bodies painted with swirling patterns of red and black. From the shadows, the crowd watches. A conch shell blows, a low, mournful note that carries across the terraces. The priests begin to chant. Drums follow, beating the rhythm of the earth. The ruler steps forward, places his hand upon the stone cheek, and speaks words meant not for men but for the gods who listen through stone. He offers incense, maize, feathers, perhaps even blood. Smoke curls upward, enveloping both man and monument. The air thickens with the scent of copal and sweat. And then, for a moment, the living ruler and the carved face seem to merge, the same profile, the same expression. Flesh and stone become reflections of one another. In that instant, he is not merely remembered. He is eternal. When the ceremony ends, the crowd disperses. Children run laughing through the plaza again. Traders return to their stalls. The ruler descends the steps, his attendants fanning him with palm leaves. Life resumes its rhythm. But the head remains, silent and unblinking. For generations, it will watch as new houses rise and fall, as floods reshape the land, as rulers come and go. One day the city itself will fade, swallowed by jungle and time, but the head will endure. Even buried, it will hold the shape of memory, the weight of a face that once commanded a nation. And that endurance, perhaps, is the truest essence of these monuments. The Olmecs built them not simply to glorify individuals, but to defy the impermanence of their world. In a land where the rivers could erase a village overnight, where the jungle devoured everything, stone was their rebellion against oblivion. To carve a head was to say, we were here. We mattered. It is humbling to realize how far that message traveled. Thousands of years later, when the first modern explorers stumbled upon these faces, the world was baffled. Some thought they must depict African voyagers, Phoenicians, even lost Atlanteans. The truth was simpler and far more powerful. They were the faces of America's first civilization, born of its own soil, its own genius. The Olmecs had no need of foreign inspiration. They looked at the mountains and saw gods sleeping in stone. You continue walking, tracing the silent procession of heads. Each one marks a different generation, a different phase of Olmec history. The earliest are raw, monumental. The later ones, more refined, lines cleaner, expressions subtler. It is as if the sculptors learned to see more deeply with each passing century, to capture not just the likeness of power but its essence. There's one, smaller than the rest, its features softer, almost weary. Perhaps it was the last, carved as the civilization waned, when Venta's plazas were already emptying, its temples silenced. The face looks older, the eyes sadder, as though aware that its world was slipping away. Even so, it endures. The jungle may reclaim the cities, but it cannot silence the stone. Night descends again. The moon rises over the flooded plains, casting pale light over the colossal faces. They seem to wake under its glow, their features shifting subtly in the shadows. You walk among them quietly, the air cool now, smelling faintly of salt and rain. It's strange, the longer you look, the less they seem like relics and the more they feel alive. There's a presence here, patient and watchful. Perhaps that's what the Olmecs intended, not monuments to be admired, but sentinels to bear witness. They were never meant for museums. They were meant to stand here, in this breathing, living land, their gaze forever fixed on the edge of the world. The frogs begin to sing. The river murmurs. The jungle folds itself back into night. You sit beside one of the heads, the largest, perhaps, at San Lorenzo. The air vibrates faintly with the chorus of insects. Your thoughts drift. You think of the workers who shaped this stone, the priests who blessed it, the ruler who once looked upon it and saw himself immortal. You think of time, the endless river that carries civilizations away and yet leaves traces on its banks, a carved face, a pattern, a song. And you understand that the colossal heads are not just art. They are memory given form. They are the bridge between the human and the eternal. They are the Olmec way of saying that even in a world of floods and decay, something can last. The mist thickens again as dawn approaches. A soft rain begins to fall, drumming gently on the stone. Droplets run down the carved cheeks like tears. The world feels hushed, reverent. When the first rays of sunlight pierce the clouds, they catch the curve of the forehead, the glint of water on basalt, the faint shimmer of moss. For a moment, it looks as though the head is breathing. And then, the sound of footsteps. A new generation of workers approaches the plaza, carrying tools of stone and wood. They are here to begin another monument. The ruler has decreed it. The old head will remain where it stands, but beside it a new one will rise, carved from stone dragged again from the mountains. The cycle continues: power, devotion, endurance. You step back, letting the mist swallow the scene. The river gleams faintly to the east. Somewhere beyond it, the first hammerstones strike basalt, and a new echo joins the endless rhythm of the Olmec world. The sound carries far, through the jungle, across centuries, into the ears of those who will one day wonder who these people were. The answer waits in stone. And as you turn toward the sound, the story moves with you, beyond the heads, beyond the kings, into the next revelation, the world of art and symbols, where the Olmec imagination explodes into form and myth, where gods and men share the same skin. You walk on, the drums faint but steady, the colossal faces watching as you disappear into the dawn. The air is alive with movement. Everywhere you look, there is pattern, spirals carved into basalt altars, lines incised into jade so fine you can barely see them, masks whose features seem to shift with the light. Here, in the workshops of San Lorenzo and Venta, art is not decoration. It is communication. The Olmecs did not paint merely to please the eye or to record events. They carved and shaped and painted to speak, to gods, to ancestors, to forces that moved unseen through the earth and sky. Every object, from the grandest monument to the smallest bead, carried meaning. Every curve and every symbol was a prayer. Imagine you are standing in one of those workshops. The morning light filters through reed walls. The floor is cool and hard-packed, the air thick with dust and the scent of wet stone. A group of artisans sits cross-legged on woven mats, their hands moving with quiet precision. Before them lie their materials: jade, serpentine, basalt, clay, obsidian. Each piece is sacred. Jade, green as new maize, was life itself, the breath of the gods made solid. Serpentine carried the shimmer of water, the promise of fertility. Basalt was strength, permanence, the bones of the earth. Even clay held spiritual charge. It came from the body of the world, soft and alive, waiting to be shaped by human hands. The master artisan, his fingers calloused from years of labor, holds a small piece of jade to the light. It glows from within, translucent, as if lit by its own fire. He begins to carve with an obsidian blade, working so slowly that progress is invisible to the untrained eye. The pattern he etches will not be random. It will be the curl of a serpent, the feather of a bird, the jawline of a god. Symbols that bind heaven and earth. The Olmec aesthetic feels both alien and familiar. Their figures are rounded, almost soft, yet the faces are filled with authority. Their infants, those strange jaguar babies with downturned mouths and almond eyes, are unsettling, divine, and tender all at once. What were they meant to be? Perhaps they represent the offspring of gods and humans, the union of sky and earth, lightning and rain. In many Olmec carvings, you see a mother cradling such a child, her face calm, her body powerful, the infant's mouth open as if mid-roar. It is a strange tenderness, the tenderness of creation itself. Others believe these jaguars depict rulers in transformation. In Olmec belief, a king was not merely a man, he was a shaman who could slip between worlds. During ritual trance, induced by pain, fasting, or hallucinogenic plants, he could become the jaguar, the night hunter, the master of the underworld. So those fanged infants carved from jade and basalt may not be children at all. They may be metamorphosis itself, the moment when flesh dissolves and spirit takes new form. You step into another chamber. a temple, perhaps, or a ritual enclosure. The walls are painted with red pigment, deep as dried blood. At its center stands an altar carved with intricate reliefs, serpents coiling around human figures, rain gods descending from clouds, rulers kneeling before jaguars. The composition is deliberate. The human and divine are inseparable. One figure sits upon a throne that is also a cave, its mouth shaped like the jaws of a monster. This is no random design. To the Olmecs, caves were portals, mouths of the earth through which souls could pass between realms. Their rulers, often depicted emerging from such openings, were portrayed as intermediaries, beings who could climb from darkness into light. To rule was to rise from the underworld. Every image reinforced this cosmic hierarchy. The ruler stood at the center, the axis of the world, surrounded by symbols of duality, serpent and bird, sky and earth, male and female, life and death. Even the very lines of their carvings echo these themes, curving, cyclical, never truly ending. In Olmec art, nothing is linear. Everything returns, transforms, and repeats. A breeze stirs through the temple. You catch a faint metallic scent, iron oxide, ground cinnabar, the pigment they used to paint their sacred objects. Red was the color of life and blood, but also of death and renewal. You move closer to a small altar at the side of the chamber. Upon it lies a set of jade celts, flat, elongated blades arranged in a fan. They gleam softly in the filtered light. Their placement is not random. They form the shape of a maize sprout rising from the soil. Archaeologists once uncovered such an arrangement at La Venta, 16 jade celts buried together, accompanied by small figurines of greenstone and serpentine. To modern eyes, it might look like a ritual display. To the Olmecs, it was a universe in miniature, the center of the world represented in polished stone, a gift returned to the earth that had given them life. In Olmec thought, art was never meant to be merely seen. It was meant to be buried, to complete a cycle. What we uncover today were once offerings, not exhibitions. They were placed carefully beneath plazas, within temples, under thrones, hidden gifts to the gods, intended to maintain cosmic balance. Their beauty was not for human eyes. It was for the unseen. As you walk through the site, you notice that even the ground beneath your feet seems patterned. Stones arranged in subtle lines mark the outlines of plazas, platforms, and ceremonial pathways. These too are part of the design. The Olmecs built their cities as if they were works of art. San Lorenzo's terraces were sculpted to mimic sacred mountains. La Venta's great pyramid rose in a perfect cone, an artificial volcano mirroring the distant Tuxtla peaks. The city itself was a symbol, its layout aligned to the stars, its boundaries defined by rivers and wetlands. Standing atop one of these mounds, you realize that you are inside a living sculpture, a vast artwork carved not from jade or basalt but from the land itself. When the Olmecs shaped Earth, they shaped meaning. Let's look closer at their symbols, the vocabulary of their belief. Every civilization has its language of the divine. For the Egyptians, it was the falcon and the ankh. For the Sumerians, the bull and the star. For the Olmecs, it was the serpent, the jaguar, the maize plant, and the infant. Each symbol told a story. The serpent slithered through the rivers and the clouds. It was the god of water and lightning, connecting the underworld and the heavens. In its curves, they saw rain's descent and the river's winding course. The feathered serpent, born of this symbol, would later soar through the midst of Mesoamerica as Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, the bringer of wisdom. The jaguar, powerful and nocturnal, ruled the night and the underworld. It was strength, danger, fertility, and rebirth. When it roared, the people heard thunder. When it hunted, they saw the hunger of the gods. The maize plant was the axis of existence, the food that was also flesh. In later myths of the Maya and the Aztecs, humans were said to be made from maize dough, their bodies needed from the earth's sustenance. The Olmecs planted that idea long before anyone wrote it down. And the infant, the infant. the symbol of birth and transformation. The Olmecs carved babies with downturned mouths, slitted eyes, and the faces of jaguars. It was the eternal paradox, innocence and divinity, fragility and power. Together, these images formed the grammar of the Olmec cosmos. You pause before a row of small figurines lined up on a clay shelf. They're tiny, no taller than your hand, but each is distinct. One holds a staff, another wears a headdress shaped like a bird, another crouches in a gesture of offering. Their expressions are serene, almost meditative. Imagine them arrayed in a ritual, perhaps at night, placed in a shallow pit while priests chanted over them. Above, the sky glowed with stars. The air smelled of smoke and flowers. One by one, the figurines were buried, sealed in layers of clay, a frozen congregation waiting millennia to be found again. It's tempting to think of them as primitive dolls, but that would miss the point. They are actors in a cosmic drama, each representing forces far larger than themselves. In their stillness, they speak of order, of creation, of the fragile balance between man and God. Olmec art is not concerned with realism. It is concerned with essence. Their sculptors capture not the surface of things but their energy. A jaguar is not depicted in motion, it is shown coiled with potential, its muscles tense, its gaze eternal. A ruler is not shown mid-speech but in the quiet gravity of transformation. Look at their altars, massive stones carved with figures emerging from niches or caverns, surrounded by swirling designs. These are not random patterns. They are wind and water, the invisible forces that shape the world. Even their smallest carvings carry this sense of animation. A jade pendant might twist like smoke. A mask might combine human and animal features in perfect symmetry. The line between art and magic dissolves completely. You find yourself wondering about the artists themselves. Were they mere craftsmen, or were they initiates, keepers of sacred knowledge? It seems likely they were both. In a world where every act of creation mirrored divine creation, the artisan was a priest. His workshop was a temple. His tools were instruments of prayer. The first strike of hammerstone against basalt echoed the thunder of the gods shaping the world from chaos. And when he finished, when he polished the final surface and saw his reflection shimmer in the jade, perhaps he whispered a quiet invocation, not to himself, but to the spirit he had just released into form. Outside, the sky has darkened again. A storm is building. The wind carries the scent of ozone and wet leaves. The priests hurry to light torches around the plaza. The firelight flickers over carvings of serpents and jaguars, making them seem to move. A bolt of lightning flashes across the horizon, followed by the deep growl of thunder. The people bow their heads, whispering prayers. The storm is not fearsome, it is sacred. It is the gods speaking through sky and rain. You realize now that the Olmecs lived inside a constant dialogue of symbols. The world itself was art, alive, communicative, divine. When they painted, carved, or buried offerings, they weren't creating images of the gods. They were participating in them. Every stroke of pigment, every chip of stone, was part of the ongoing act of creation. In this sense, their entire civilization was a single artwork, a self-renewing expression of the belief that the sacred could be touched, shaped, and made visible. The rain begins to fall, soft at first, then heavy, drumming against the ground. Water flows down the terraces, tracing paths that glimmer with reflected firelight. You stand in the downpour, watching as the sculptures glisten. The jade shines brighter, the stone darkens, the world seems newly born. It's easy to imagine an Olmec artist standing just as you do now, watching his creation meet the rain. To him, the water wasn't a threat to his work. It was a blessing, a conversation between his hands and the sky. And perhaps, as the rain poured over the carved faces, he whispered thanks. By morning, the storm has passed. Mist rises again from the earth. The plazas shimmer with puddles that reflect the clouds. You walk once more among the artifacts, the figurines, the altars, the jade celts buried beneath your feet. and you feel something subtle shift inside you. You begin to see the world as they did. Everything is alive. Everything speaks. The curve of a river, the shape of a mountain, the twist of smoke, all part of the same language. The Olmecs didn't invent art to represent life. They created it to continue life, to keep the conversation between matter and spirit alive. You look back one last time at the workshop, the temples, the buried offerings. The light is soft, the air still humming with the echoes of the night storm. Somewhere, a conch shell blows, summoning priests to the next ceremony. The drums begin again, slow and deep. Their rhythm feels like breathing, the breath of the world itself. You follow the sound through the mist, past the carvings, past the jade and stone, toward the rising sun. Ahead, you can already sense the next threshold, where these symbols take on divine faces, where gods step fully into being. The path winds through the trees, golden light flickering through the leaves. And as you walk, the world itself seems to whisper, "Come see the gods who were born from stone." Let's keep walking, slowly, softly, as the light changes again. The rain has stopped, leaving the jungle washed clean, glistening. The air smells of wet stone and sap, and in the quiet, you can hear the low murmur of water running through canals and streams. The art, the symbols, the carvings, they've been leading us somewhere all along. Every spiral, every jaguar's eye, every serpent's curve was a doorway. And now we step through it. You feel it before you see it. The air thickens, dense with something unseen, reverence, perhaps, or memory. A breeze moves through the trees, carrying the faint scent of copal resin, sharp and sweet, the incense of ceremony. The sound of drums begins, not loud, but steady, each beat a heartbeat, each pause a breath. You're entering sacred ground. The Olmecs did not separate gods from the world. To them, divinity was everywhere, in the pulse of the river, the hunger of the jaguar, the hiss of the wind through the reeds. The gods were not distant watchers but the forces of life itself, made visible through ritual and art. Every god they worshipped was part of a greater balance, a cycle of transformation that bound heaven, earth, and the underworld into one breathing universe. At the center of it all was rain. In a land of swamps and floods, rain was both gift and terror. Without it, the maize withered. With too much, entire villages drowned. The Olmecs learned early that water was the blood of the earth, capricious, sacred, and alive. Their rain god had many faces, sometimes a crouching infant with a jaguar's snarl, sometimes a fierce, fanged being emerging from a cave. His eyes were often almond-shaped, his mouth downturned, his teeth bared. To us, he looked strange, half child, half beast, but to them, he was life itself, the constant reminder that creation and destruction were the same hand. They called him something we can no longer pronounce, a name lost in the silence between centuries. But his image endured. He became the ancestor of later Mesoamerican deities, the Maya Chac, the Aztec Tlaloc, gods of thunder, lightning, and rain. When thunder rolled across the horizon, the Olmecs heard his laughter. When lightning split a ceiba tree, it was his voice calling down from the heavens. You can almost feel him in the air, the thick humidity before a storm, the electric stillness of a sky about to break. But the Olmec cosmos was not ruled by a single god. It was a web of relationships, a pantheon of forces each tied to a different aspect of the living world. There was the maize god, the eternal provider, symbol of nourishment and renewal. His image was youthful, serene, crowned with sprouting corn. He died every harvest and was reborn every spring, mirroring the cycle of planting and reaping, of death feeding life. Then came the earth monster, a vast crocodilian being whose open jaws were both cave and womb, the entrance to the underworld, the place where life returned after death. Its skin was the crust of the world, its breath the wind through the reeds. There was the feathered serpent, born of water and sky, coiling between realms as a messenger of balance. Its body was the rain cloud, its scales the glint of lightning, its wings the rising wind. And of course, there was the jaguar, lord of the night, master of transformation, symbol of kingship and the hidden power of the spirit. The Olmec gods were never human in the way later civilizations imagined them. They were hybrid, fluid, always shifting. Human faces sprouted fangs. Animal bodies stood upright. The boundary between man and God was a doorway, not a wall. You walk now into a broad plaza, ringed by stone altars. The ground is still damp, darkened by the night's rain. Priests move silently among the offerings, their bodies painted in bands of black and red. One of them kneels before a stone altar carved in relief, a man emerging from the mouth of a jaguar, arms outstretched, eyes closed. This is no ordinary carving. It's a vision in stone, the birth of divinity. The man is both ruler and god, stepping out of the underworld, reborn through the jaws of the beast. Above him swirl clouds and serpents. Below him, water curls into spirals. It's not just art, it's theology rendered in rock. The message is clear: power comes from descent, not domination. To rule, one must first descend into the earth, face death, and emerge renewed. The priests bow low before the altar. Smoke rises from burning copal, twisting upward into the sky. The air hums with chanting, deep and rhythmic. It's not melody, it's invocation. The words are old, older than any written language, and yet you almost understand them. They are calling to the gods of water, of rain, of maize, of night. They are calling to the forces that breathe through every living thing. Look closer at their faces as they chant. Some wear masks carved from jade, others painted clay. The masks are not disguises, they are transformations. By putting them on, the priests become vessels for the gods. Their voices deepen, their movements slow, as if something larger speaks through them. One priest holds a bowl of water tinted with blood. He dips his fingers and sprinkles droplets across the altar. Each red stain spreads like a flower blooming against the stone. To the Olmecs, blood was not death, it was currency, energy, the gift that flowed through humans and gods alike. They did not fear sacrifice, they understood it. To give a drop of blood was to feed the universe. To spill life was to keep life moving. And sometimes, perhaps, when the droughts were long or the storms too fierce, greater offerings were made. Not out of cruelty, but desperation, the belief that only the most precious thing could restore balance to the world. The air thickens as the chant reaches its peak. The drums thunder like heartbeats of the earth. The rain begins again, first a whisper, then a roar. The gods have answered. When you step back into the open air, the storm is fading, but the earth still glistens. You look around, and suddenly the carvings that once seemed strange begin to make sense. A jaguar with human hands. A serpent with feathers. An infant with a snarling mouth. They are not separate beings. They are expressions of power, of transformation. The Olmec world was built on dualities, life and death, earth and sky, order and chaos. Their gods embodied the moments where opposites met. Every storm, every birth, every eclipse was a reminder that balance must be maintained through motion. Their religion wasn't about faith in something distant. It was about participation in something eternal. In the evenings, when the air cooled and the jungle sighed, the Olmecs must have told stories of their gods, the myths that explained their world. We can only imagine fragments of those tales, reconstructed from the symbols they left behind. Perhaps they told of the first rain god, born from the tears of a sky serpent who wept for a parched earth. Perhaps they spoke of a hero who entered the underworld to steal maize from the jaws of the earth monster, returning to feed his people. Perhaps they whispered of the jaguar's child, born in a storm, whose roar became thunder. These stories would not have been entertainment. They were survival guides, encoded knowledge of seasons, floods, and fertility. In their myths, nature and morality were one. The river flooded because it hungered, the rain fell because it was appeased. Every story was both warning and blessing. You pause beside a shallow pool where the rain has gathered. The water is still, reflecting the sky through a thin film of mist. You kneel and look down, and for a moment you see not your own face but 100 faces layered beneath it, stone masks, jade figurines, the faces of gods long vanished. You realize that the Olmecs did not invent their deities. They discovered them. The gods were already here, waiting in the stones, the rivers, the storms. The people simply gave them form and name. Their religion was not about escape from the world, but immersion in it. One carving catches your eye, a small jade mask, the size of a palm, its surface worn smooth by centuries. The eyes are narrow, the mouth slightly open, the features serene yet alert. This mask, you realize, might have been placed upon the body of the dead. To the Olmecs, death was not an ending but a passage, a return to the womb of the earth. The mask was not to hide the face, but to reveal the true one beneath, the divine aspect that returned to the gods. Perhaps when the body was buried, surrounded by jade offerings and shells, the priests whispered blessings, guiding the soul through the underworld's rivers and caverns until it reached a place where maize sprouted eternally. In that way, even death served the gods of life. The sky clears again. The sun breaks through the clouds, lighting the wet leaves until they shimmer like emeralds. The air is full of birdsong. The Olmecs would have seen this as a sign, the rebirth of light after communion with darkness. Their ceremonies were not meant to dominate nature but to synchronize with it, to move in step with the rhythm of the seasons. Their gods were not absolute rulers, they were collaborators. In this balance, there is something deeply human. We moderns often imagine ancient religion as superstition, a desperate attempt to control what could not be controlled. But here, in the heart of Olmen, you sense something different. The Olmecs did not seek to command the world, they sought to join it. To live in conversation with rain and sun, storm and seed, life and death. Their gods were reminders that everything, every drop of water, every stone, every breath, was part of a single, living whole. As night falls, torches are lit along the river banks. Their reflections flicker on the water like floating stars. You hear the soft beat of drums again, slower this time, almost a lullaby. The priests chant to the gods of the four directions, east for birth, west for death, north for the ancestors, south for renewal. The air hums with tranquility. You sit by the river, listening. The frogs sing. The wind moves through the reeds. The stars emerge, bright and steady above the dark horizon. Somewhere beyond the jungle, other fires burn, other cities where the same rituals unfold, where the same gods are invoked. The network of belief stretches across the land like invisible roots, binding all the Olmec centers together. They may not have built empires, but they built something greater, a shared vision of the sacred. And through that vision, they gave birth to every civilization that followed. The Maya, the Zapotecs, the Mexica, all would inherit the rain god, the maize god, the serpent, the jaguar. The Olmec pantheon became the foundation of Mesoamerican spirituality. Their gods never died. They only changed names. You look up one last time at the sky. The Milky Way cuts across the heavens like a river of light. The priest said it was the road of souls, the same path that rain takes when it falls, and the same path it follows when it rises again as mist. Everything circulates. Everything returns. The gods of the Olmecs are still here, if you know how to see them, in the storm that rolls across the gulf, in the rippling of water over stone, in the quiet rhythm of breath and heartbeat. The jungle whispers as you rise. The air feels cooler now, calmer. You turn toward the east, where the horizon glows faintly with the first promise of dawn. The drums fade behind you, replaced by the soft splash of paddles on water. A canoe waits at the edge of the river, carved from a single tree trunk, its prow shaped like a serpent's head. You step in. The current catches you gently, carrying you downstream. Ahead through the mist, rise the outlines of mounds and temples, the sacred centers where these gods were worshipped, where the divine took on architecture and ritual. The journey is leading you deeper still, into the heart of their civilization. And so, without pause, you glide towards sacred centers, where the stones themselves begin to speak, and the gods dwell not only in myth, but in the very foundations of the earth. Let's drift onward together. The canoe slides over the slow dark water, its wooden hull whispering against the current. The air smells of river mud and crushed reeds, of the faint smoke from distant fires. Behind us, the chants of the priests fade into memory. Ahead, the mist brightens with dawn. The drums of the gods have not fallen silent. They are changing rhythm, calling us now to where the divine took shape in earth and stone. The river bends gently eastward, and through the trees the first mounds appear, soft outlines against the rising sun. At first they seem like natural hills, but as you drift closer you notice symmetry, precision. Terraces cut in straight lines. Platforms of earth piled with deliberate care. Paths radiating outward like spokes of a wheel. This is La Venta, heart of the Olmec world. The air is still here, heavy with the weight of centuries. A thin veil of mist lingers over the plaza, glowing gold in the morning light. Somewhere, unseen birds cry across the marshes. The world feels balanced, suspended between dream and waking. Your canoe bumps softly against the shore. You step onto the bank, your feet sinking into damp earth, and look up at the great mound that dominates the horizon. It rises like a mountain reborn, an immense cone of clay and stone more than 30 meters high, its slopes once faced with gleaming blocks. The jungle has softened its edges, but the shape endures, a perfect volcano sculpted by human hands. To the Olmecs, mountains were not mere landscapes. They were sacred bodies, pillars connecting the underworld, earth, and sky. Here at La Venta, they built one from scratch, giving the gods a home made from the very soil of their world. You climb the slope slowly. The clay is cool beneath your hands, damp with morning dew. Each step feels like a prayer. From the summit, the entire city spreads before you, a pattern of plazas, mounds, and courtyards stretching toward the horizon. It is astonishingly precise. The main axis runs north to south, aligned with the movement of the sun. Buildings are arranged in symmetrical pairs, balanced as if mirroring the cosmos itself. Even the open plazas are measured, their dimensions echoing celestial cycles. This was not random building. It was cosmic architecture, an attempt to make the heavens tangible, to give the invisible rhythm of the world a physical form. Standing here, you can almost sense it, the hum of alignment, the harmony of earth and sky. Below you, the central plaza glows faintly in the new light. Priests move through the mist like shadows, carrying baskets of offerings, jade beads, shells, fragments of obsidian that glitter like stars. They move toward the great pyramid's base, where a low platform of stone serves as altar and stage. Here, ceremony is not a performance. It is the pulse of the city. When the conch shells sound, the people gather. Farmers from the surrounding villages arrive in canoes, their faces painted with lime and ash. Traders come bearing salt and cacao, artisans with gifts of carved stone. All kneel as the ruler appears, his body painted, his headdress heavy with feathers and jade. He stands not merely as man, but as the living axis of the world. Behind him, the pyramid looms like the spine of the earth itself. The first rays of sunlight strike its peak and spill downward, bathing the ruler in gold. The drums begin, deep, resonant, echoing off the mounds. You feel the ground vibrate under your feet. The ceremony begins. To the Olmecs, cities like La Venta and San Lorenzo were not settlements. They were cosmos made visible. Every structure, every street, every buried offering represented one aspect of the sacred universe. The plazas were the surface of the earth. The mounds were mountains, homes of the gods. The canals and reservoirs were the rivers of the underworld. Even the act of building was ritual. When they laid the foundation for a new mound, they buried offerings deep within its heart, small jade figurines arranged in precise formation, as if enacting a ceremony beneath the surface. over time, as the city grew, layer upon layer of offerings built up like the strata of faith itself. These were not sacrifices of fear, but of gratitude. Each object placed into the ground was a way of giving back, returning to the gods a portion of what the earth had provided. When archaeologists uncovered these caches thousands of years later, they found them undisturbed, still glowing faintly green from the preserved jade. It was as if the prayers were still fresh, still waiting for the world to listen. You walk through the central court. The sun has burned away the mist, revealing more of La Venta's design. The ground beneath your feet is paved with clay-colored red and yellow, polished smooth as if it had once been walked by thousands of bare feet in rhythmic procession. Along the eastern edge of the plaza stand colossal altars, massive basalt blocks carved with scenes of rulers emerging from the mouths of jaguars or serpents. Their surfaces are dark, glossy with moisture, and their reliefs catch the sunlight in sharp contrast. You stop before one of them, Altar 4, scholars will call it one day. It shows a man seated within a niche, his hands gripping a rope that coils around the stone, disappearing into the carved earth beneath. Some say he is pulling another figure from the underworld. Others believe he is tethering the worlds together. In his eyes, though, you see calm authority, the serenity of one who knows that balance must be maintained, no matter the cost. Around the base of the altar, small holes mark where torches once burned, their flames reflecting off the wet stone. You can almost see it, the flickering light dancing across the carvings, making the figures seem to move, to breathe. At night, these altars must have come alive, their shadows whispering the stories of gods and ancestors. From La Venta's plazas, your gaze travels outward. Beyond the city lie smaller mounds, villages, and outposts connected by causeways and waterways. This was not a kingdom of walls and fortresses. It was a network of sacred centers, each one a node in the spiritual landscape of the Olmec heartland. San Lorenzo, older and once grander, had been built atop a natural plateau sculpted into terraces, its canals engineered to control the flow of water like veins beneath the skin of the earth. Tres Zapotes, farther west, would one day rise from the ruins of La Venta, carrying the torch of Olmec faith into the next age. Together they formed a constellation across the swampy plains, each side aligned, as if deliberately placed to mirror the stars. You begin to understand that the Olmecs did not think of their cities as separate. Each was part of a greater organism, a reflection of the cosmos itself stretching from mountain to coast. Walk further into La Venta, and you'll find something remarkable, a buried mosaic made entirely of green serpentine blocks, laid out in intricate patterns like a mask of the earth itself. It was discovered beneath layers of clay, sealed and hidden from view the moment it was finished. No one ever walked upon it. It was art meant for the gods alone. The mosaic forms a stylized face, wide eyes, downturned mouth, framed by swirling patterns. To modern eyes it might look abstract, but to the Olmecs it represented the earth monster, the living ground, the womb of creation. Imagine the ceremony, priests arranging each block with reverence, whispering prayers as they fitted the final pieces. When it was complete, they covered it forever, returning it to the soil. In that act of burial, they acknowledged a truth older than words, that creation is only complete when it returns to its source. The city breathes with its own rhythm. You can feel it in the heat that rises from the clay, in the hum of insects, in the sound of water flowing through the hidden canals that crisscross the ground. Everywhere, the connection between human and divine is seamless. The priests' residences are built beside workshops, the rulers' palaces stand within sight of the altars. Governance and worship are one. The same hands that shape jade beads also pour libations to the gods. At dusk, when the sky turns the color of burning copper, the city glows. Torches line the causeways. Smoke rises in spirals from the altars. The people gather again in the central plaza. Children play at the edges while their parents bow their heads in prayer. The ruler climbs the pyramid steps slowly, his silhouette framed against the dying light. From below, He looks like a shadow moving toward the heavens. The conch shells sound once more, their low moan rolling across the plain. The ceremony of the setting sun begins. As darkness falls, the stars emerge, bright, clear, infinite. The Olmecs were careful watchers of the sky. They noted when certain stars rose and fell, when the sun aligned with their temples, when Venus gleamed brightest before dawn. They built their sacred centers to echo these cycles, turning architecture into calendar. The pyramid of La Venta aligns with the sunrise on specific days of the year, perhaps marking the planting season, the rain's arrival, or the start of ritual festivals. To live in such a city was to live inside the heartbeat of the universe. The people did not measure time by numbers, but by alignment, by the way shadow met light, the way the sun kissed the horizon, the way the stars turned above the mounds. The sacred centers were not static monuments. They were instruments, tuned to the cosmos, resonating with its rhythm. In the quiet hours before dawn, when even the frogs fall silent, the city seems to rest. The torches burn low. A fine mist settles again over the plazas. Somewhere a priest chants softly, offering thanks for another night survived. You walk through the empty courtyards, your footsteps muffled by damp earth. The colossal heads loom at the edges, their faces half lit by moonlight. Beyond them, the great pyramid rises, its peak lost in fog. It is peaceful here, but not lifeless. Beneath your feet, offerings lie buried, figurines, celts, and mosaics, their arrangements untouched for millennia. They sleep like seeds in the dark, still humming with the prayers of those who placed them there. You realize that the city itself is alive, not metaphorically, but truly. The Olmecs built it to breathe, to feed, to remember. Every ceremony renewed its pulse, every offering fed its heart. La Venta was not a collection of buildings, it was a living god. By morning, the mist has thinned. The light returns, soft and golden. You stand once more on the summit of the pyramid and look out over the endless green plain. The rivers glitter like mirrors. In the distance, smoke rises from smaller mounds where other ceremonies are beginning. This is the Olmec world at its height, a network of sacred centers linked by trade, ritual, and faith. Its people move by river and by foot, carrying obsidian, jade, cacao, feathers, and salt. Its priests keep calendars of stars and rains. Its rulers command not through armies, but through the awe of divine order. It is a civilization without empire, and yet its influence stretches far beyond sight. The gods born here will travel to every corner of Mesoamerica, carried in memory and stone. Even when La Venta falls silent centuries from now, the pattern it created, the alignment of heaven and earth, will endure. You close your eyes. The wind brushes your face. The drums begin again, slow, steady, ancient. Somewhere below, a new procession gathers. Priests and artisans carry jade figurines to bury beneath a newly raised platform. The ruler watches from above, his expression calm, timeless. The people sing softly, voices rising and falling with the wind. As they dig, the scent of wet clay fills the air. The earth opens once more to receive its gifts. You feel the rhythm in your chest, the endless cycle of offering and renewal, of giving and receiving, of life returning to life. And as you stand there, the city seems to breathe with you. Far to the west, a storm gathers over the mountains. Lightning flashes, illuminating the horizon. The rain god's laughter echoes faintly across the plains. The people glance upward, smiling. They know the gods have accepted their offering. You descend the pyramid slowly. The ground is warm beneath your feet. The smell of rain is approaching again, a promise, a renewal. You pause at the base and look back one last time at the pyramid, the plazas, the altars, the faces of stone. The city hums softly, alive with memory. Then you turn toward the path that leads deeper into the forest, where the drums are leading next, toward the hidden rituals, the offerings of blood and jade that kept these sacred centers alive. The air darkens as clouds gather once more. The first drops of rain strike the leaves like whispered applause. The gods are awake again. And so, through thunder and mist, we move without pause into rituals and sacrifice, where faith and fear intertwine, and the price of balance is written in blood. The rain has begun again, soft at first, then steady. It falls through the canopy in silver threads, pattering on the wide jungle leaves. The air smells of wet clay, smoke, and something faintly metallic. You follow the path downward, toward a clearing lit by flickering fire. The ground underfoot is slick and uneven, the earth cut by narrow channels to drain the water away. Around the clearing rise carved stones, altars darkened by soot and centuries, their surfaces alive with spirals, jaguars, serpents, and human faces. This is no ordinary place. This is a space between worlds. The Olmecs came here not to worship in comfort, but to communicate, to open doors between the seen and the unseen. Their gods were not silent observers. They were living forces that had to be fed, coaxed, and occasionally appeased. And so the people learned the oldest dialogue of all, offering and response. In the flickering light, the priests move like ghosts. Their bodies are painted with black and red clay, their hair matted with rain. Some wear masks shaped like jaguar faces. Others are crowned with feathers that shimmer when the firelight catches them. The smell of burning copal fills the air, sweet, sharp, intoxicating. Each priest carries something different: a bundle of maize, a carved jade bead, a gourd filled with cacao, a stingray spine gleaming darkly in the light. They move around a central altar, chanting words too old to be remembered, their rhythm matching the drums that pound somewhere beyond the trees. The sound builds, layer upon layer, until it feels as if the earth itself is drumming along. The ceremony begins with offering. Bundles of maize are laid upon the altar, first fruits from the season's harvest. Cacao, the drink of the gods, is poured over them. Feathers are added, blue, red, gold, plucked from macas and quetzal. The priests light more incense, and smoke curls upward like hands reaching toward the sky. But this is only the beginning. To the Olmecs, ritual was not a matter of belief. It was a form of survival. The gods were not abstract ideas. They were natural forces, beautiful, dangerous, unpredictable. The rain god could bless or drown. The earth god could nourish or devour. To keep the balance, humans had to give back some of what they received. Everything they did was shaped by this understanding. Every harvest, every birth, every storm was mirrored by ritual. When the rains failed, they offered food. When the floods came, they offered blood. And when balance demanded more, when the world itself seemed to tremble, they offered life. You might expect fear here, but what you feel is something else: calm, reverence, precision. The priests move with purpose, their actions practiced and careful. This is not chaos, it is choreography. Every gesture is sacred, every motion part of a story older than memory. The stingray spines come out first. Each priest presses the sharp point against his own flesh, thigh, tongue, ear, and draws a thin line of blood. The drops fall onto leaves, into bowls of water, onto the altar itself. The blood darkens the offerings, the red spreading across the pale maize and feathers like a blessing. They believe that blood carries life's essence, the divine energy that connects all beings. To give it is not to die but to communicate, to speak the only language the gods truly understand. You watch as the chief priest, his arms streaked with crimson, raises his hands to the sky. The rain mingles with the blood on his skin, washing it down his body in thin, winding trails. His voice rises, low and rhythmic, calling for balance, for rain that nourishes but does not destroy, for maize that grows tall but does not rot, for peace between the worlds. And perhaps the gods answer. Because at that moment, a cool wind passes through the clearing, rustling the trees, and the fire flares brighter. The line between ritual and art blurs here. Look closer at the altars around you. Their carvings show scenes of offering, but they're not static images. their instructions, visual prayers. One shows a ruler holding a rope that winds into the jaws of a jaguar, symbolizing communication with the underworld. Another shows a man emerging from a serpent's body, reborn through sacrifice. In the Olmec imagination, the act of giving and the act of creation were the same. The gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world. The rain god tore open the sky to release water. The maize god buried himself to feed mankind. The sun god burned endlessly so life could grow. Humanity's role was to mirror that divine generosity, to give back in kind. When the priests bled, they were reenacting the original sacrifice, keeping the universe's wheel turning. You step closer to one of the altars. Its top is smooth from centuries of use, the surface stained dark. In its grooves you can see faint traces of red ochre, mixed with ash and rain. A tiny puddle has formed there, and the firelight reflects in it like an unblinking eye. You understand, then, that sacrifice was never about cruelty. It was about balance. It was the price of order in a world forever teetering toward chaos. The jungle was generous but unforgiving. One season's bounty could vanish overnight in flood or drought. Disease could sweep through the villages without warning. Every Olmec lived with the awareness that survival depended on respect for the forces they could not control. Ritual was how they listened to those forces, and how they answered. As the night deepens, the ceremony grows more intense. The drums quicken, the fire leaps higher. The priest chants merge into a single, rising tone that vibrates in your chest. From the shadows, attendants bring forward small jade figurines, delicate faces, miniature bodies carved in the likeness of rulers and gods. These are offerings of wealth and spirit, destined not to be displayed but to be buried. The priests lay them at the altar's base, their hands steady despite the heat and the roar of the flames. Then they begin to dig, a small pit in the wet earth. Into it they place the figurines, shells, and beads, arranging them in perfect symmetry. When the last piece is set, they cover it gently with clay, smoothing the surface with flat stones. There will be no marker, no sign of what lies beneath. The offering is meant to vanish, to return to the womb of the earth. The rain falls harder now, drumming on the canopy, mingling with the rhythm of the drums. The ceremony is reaching its end. And then silence. The drums stop. The chanting fades. The priests kneel, motionless. The only sound is the rain. For a long time, no one moves. The air feels charged, trembling with invisible energy. The fire flickers low, its light dim and golden. Finally, the chief priest rises. He steps forward and pours a final libation of cacao and water over the altar. The liquid runs down the sides, glistening in the firelight like veins of bronze. He raises his hands again, palms open, as if in offering, and speaks softly into the storm. The words are lost to time, but their meaning is not. They are words of gratitude. The ritual is complete. Balance, for now, is restored. You might think such ceremonies were rare, reserved for special occasions. But for the Olmecs, ritual was constant, woven into the fabric of daily life. In the fields, farmers offered the first grains of maize to the earth before planting. At births, mothers burned incense to thank the gods for the breath of life. Hunters left small tokens in the forest after each kill, a tuft of fur, a few drops of blood, a whispered apology. Even the act of eating was sacred. Before each meal, a pinch of food was cast into the fire or the river as an offering. The gods were always present, always watching, always hungry, not for worship, but for recognition. To live without ritual would have been unthinkable. It would have been to step out of harmony, to invite disaster. As dawn approaches, the rain finally ceases. Mist rises again from the ground, swirling around the altars. The fires burn low, hissing as the damp air cools them. You walk among the priests as they clean the site, sweeping ash into the river, gathering the empty bowls, extinguishing the flames. Their faces are calm, almost serene. The exhaustion you might expect after such an ordeal is absent. Instead, there is peace, a quiet satisfaction, as if they have spoken directly with the heart of the world. You notice that some of them carry small scars, thin lines on their arms and chests, faded over time. These are not marks of suffering but of service, proof that they have fulfilled their duty to the gods. They remind you that sacrifice, in the Olmec sense, was not only ritual. It was a philosophy. To live was to give. Later that morning, as the sun climbs higher, you see the aftermath of another kind of ceremony, one older, darker, and whispered about in all. At the edge of the sacred precinct lies a shallow depression, half filled with rainwater. Around its rim are fragments of shell and obsidian blades, their edges still sharp. The air here feels different, thicker, heavier. No one speaks of what happened in such places, but the evidence remains. There were times, perhaps rare but real, when human life itself became the offering. The Olmecs believed that rulers and priests carried divine essence. Their blood, their breath, their hearts held the power to nourish the gods. When the balance of the world was threatened, when drought lingered too long or storms destroyed the harvest, the ultimate sacrifice was made. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. The chosen victim was not seen as a victim at all, but as a vessel, a messenger sent to the other side to plead for mercy on behalf of the people. His death was transformation, his blood a bridge. We may recoil from it now, but in their world, it was the deepest form of love, the willingness to give everything back to the source. As the day brightens, the priests depart. The clearing grows quiet again. Steam rises from the wet earth. You sit for a moment beside the altar, your hands resting on the cool stone. You understand now that these rituals were not about domination or superstition. They were about connection, keeping the thread between humanity and nature alive. In the modern world, we might call it empathy. The Olmecs called it duty. They knew that life takes life to continue, that every breath is borrowed from something else. Their rituals were how they remembered to say thank you. You rise and begin to walk back toward the river. The jungle has changed since you entered. The air feels lighter, the light brighter. You hear birds calling again, their songs echoing through the trees. The river glints ahead, winding toward the horizon. You step into the shallows, the water cool around your ankles. As you look down, you see the reflection of the sky, pale blue, streaked with white. For a moment, it feels as though you're looking into another world, one that mirrors this one perfectly. The Olmecs would have seen it that way too. Every act above had its reflection below. Every offering given to the earth was received by the heavens. That was the essence of their faith, not hierarchy, but reciprocity. The same principle that governed their rituals governed their art, their trade, their politics, even their hearts. Everything moved in cycles, rising, falling, returning. And somewhere in those endless exchanges between man and God, life found its rhythm. The drums begin again, faint, far away, calling you onward. The river's current quickens, carrying you downstream toward new lands, new revelations. You look back one last time at the clearing, the altars fading behind the trees. The smoke from the fire still lingers, rising into the sky like a final prayer. The balance has been kept, for now. But the world is changing. New symbols are being carved, new sounds written into stone. Somewhere ahead, the Olmecs are experimenting with signs, glyphs, the first stirrings of written language. The same hands that offered blood to the gods will soon offer words to the future. The journey continues. You turn downstream, following the current into the next dawn, where the hum of the jungle softens into the scratch of carving tools, and the language of ritual begins to take shape in symbols. You're moving, slowly and without pause, into the next great wonder. The birth of writing. The river widens as it flows east, splitting into smaller channels that shimmer in the morning light. Along the banks, reeds bend in the breeze, and herons stalk silently through the shallows. The land feels open here, its rhythm slower, calmer, as though catching its breath after centuries of prayer. You drift toward a low rise crowned by palms. The earth is littered with shards of pottery, fragments of obsidian, and bits of carved stone half buried in soil. At first they seem random, broken remnants of a vanished age, but as you crouch and look closer, patterns begin to emerge. Lines, curves, marks that are not decoration, but intention. You lift a fragment into the light. On its surface, a cluster of small symbols has been cut, tiny faces, dots, and abstract shapes connected by faint lines. It is not picture, not pure art. It is something else entirely. It is thought made solid. Here, in the quiet heart of Olmen, the first written words of the Americas were beginning to take form. The Olmecs, we often say, left no written record. But that is not entirely true. What they left is scattered, faint, fragmentary, half buried beneath the weight of time, but it exists. The earliest known inscriptions in the New World bear their mark, the first sparks of an idea that would blaze across centuries. That meaning could be carved, fixed, and preserved beyond voice. Imagine what that meant in a world still ruled by sound. For thousands of years, memory had been a living thing, carried by storytellers, priests, and ritual. Knowledge was fluid, retold, reinterpreted, reshaped. But with these first glyphs, memory could outlive the speaker. A priest's prayer, a ruler's name, a divine decree, once carved into stone, these things could endure as long as the monument itself. Writing, for the Olmecs, was not a convenience. It was a form of immortality. You walk deeper into the ruins. The air is still, and the sunlight slants through gaps in the canopy. Ahead, a great stone slab leans at an angle, its surface rough but marked with deliberate incision. You brush away moss and soil. Beneath the green film, a series of symbols appear, rows of faces, hands, and dots. Scholars will one day call this the Cascadal block, a relic of green serpentine inscribed with 62 signs. Found far from the grand cities, it whispers of a world where words were still young, where communication itself was an act of devotion. No one yet knows exactly what these signs mean. Some resemble maize plants, others insects, animals, tools. Together they seem to pulse with rhythm, like the lines of a poem too ancient to be read. You trace the carvings with your fingers. They are shallow, delicate, yet filled with purpose. Each mark is a choice, each symbol a world. In that moment, you feel the spark of creation. The same fire that once built mounds and carved faces now burns in the human mind, a fire that shapes sound into sign, spirit into language. Writing does not appear all at once. It grows slowly, like roots beneath the soil, branching unseen until suddenly a forest stands where once there was emptiness. For the Olmecs, the seeds of writing may have sprouted from their ritual symbols, the same images carved on altars, masks, and figurines. These were not random designs, they were shorthand for divine truths. A serpent's curve meant water. A maize sprout meant life. A jaguar's eye meant power. Over time, these sacred images began to merge with another form of memory, the record of rule. When rulers needed to declare lineage, ownership, or devotion, they turned to imagery to make their claims visible. A man emerging from a cave, a face crowned with feathers, a line of dots beneath his feet. These were not only art but history. And somewhere between prayer and proclamation, the idea was born that the world itself could be written. You can almost imagine the first writer, the first mind to look at an altar and think, I can fix meaning here. He sits cross-legged beside a slab of damp clay, a stick in his hand. Around him, the jungle hums with life. His thoughts are heavy with the weight of ritual and lineage. The ruler has spoken words that must not be forgotten, words declaring his divine right, his communion with the gods. The man hesitates, then presses the stick into the clay. Once. Twice. Again. Each stroke represents a sound, a name, a power. The marks are simple at first, dots, lines, spirals, but they carry intention. When he finishes, he looks down at what he has made. The signs mean nothing to anyone else yet, but to him, they are voice preserved. He has trapped sound in matter. He has made thought visible. The Olmecs were builders of meaning as much as of stone. Their cities were already symbolic texts, their pyramids words of praise, their plazas lines of verse, their altars punctuation marks in the grammar of devotion. Writing was simply the next step, turning landscape into language. You notice it now everywhere. Carvings on the backs of colossal heads, faint grooves on jade celts, small symbols etched into pottery and shell. These were not decoration, they were records. Perhaps the name of the ruler who commissioned the monument. Perhaps the date of a ceremony, or the invocation of a god. Perhaps a story too sacred to be spoken aloud. Each glyph was a key, unlocking layers of meaning known only to the initiated. The priests, after all, were both scholars and scribes. To write was to participate in creation. One afternoon, as the sun lowers and the shadows lengthen, you watch a group of apprentices gather near a workshop. The master scribe, a thin man with hands scarred from years of carving, shows them how to shape the symbols. He draws them first in the dust with a reed, then incises them onto a soft tablet of clay. Each line must be perfect, each curve deliberate. The apprentices copy his gestures carefully, whispering the names of the symbols as they go. The sound of their voices is rhythmic, almost musical, a chant of learning. The master corrects them not with words but with silence, simply erasing a line and drawing it again. Through repetition, the sacred language becomes muscle memory. When the lesson ends, the clay tablets are placed in the sun to harden. Some will crumble in time. Others will survive for centuries, buried in layers of earth, waiting for hands like yours to find them again. You realize, standing there, that writing is not only about permanence, it is about trust. The faith that words will outlive their speaker, that meaning will bridge the gap between past and future. As you walk through the ruins, you begin to notice how deeply this new technology, if one can call it that, changes the Olmec world. Writing brings power. A spoken promise fades, a carved one endures. A ruler whose name is written in stone does not die when his body returns to earth. A law, once inscribed, cannot easily be denied. You see now how writing and rulership intertwine. The same way the priests once offered blood to renew cosmic balance, the scribes offer words to renew memory. For the Olmecs, to carve a name was to bind it to eternity. And so their cities become libraries without books, each monument a page, each glyph a heartbeat frozen in stone. Night falls. The air cools. The stars emerge one by one, reflected in the still pools between the mounds. You sit beside a broken slab, the cascadal signs faintly gleaming in the starlight. The jungle is quiet except for the soft murmur of frogs. You think about what it means to write, to fix something living into permanence. It is both miracle and risk. To preserve meaning is also to imprison it, to take the living breath of the word and turn it to stone. Perhaps the Olmec scribes understood that tension. Perhaps that is why their script remained limited, reserved for the sacred, the ceremonial, the necessary. They were careful with their words. As dawn approaches, you imagine how this new language must have sounded when read aloud. The priests would stand before the altar, tracing each symbol with their fingers, speaking the ancient names as they went. The audience might not understand every word, but they would feel its weight, the authority of inscription, the resonance of divine truth. The glyphs were not just symbols, they were spells. Each one was believed to contain the power of the concept it represented. To speak or carve a glyph for rain was to invoke rain. To inscribe life was to call it forth. This was not literacy as we know it, it was incantation. And in that sense, writing was another form of sacrifice, the offering of thought to the eternal. You walk now to the edge of the site, where a line of basalt columns rises from the earth like a row of teeth. faint engravings spiral around them, lines so shallow they catch only in certain light. When you tilt your head, they seem to move, to shimmer. You can't help but think of how similar this feels to the rituals you've seen. Both are acts of translation, from the invisible to the visible, from the divine to the human. The Olmecs offered blood to speak to their gods. Their scribes offered symbols to speak to time. Both acts are born of the same yearning, to be remembered. By midday, the air grows hot again. You walk along the river bank, past fragments of jade and shell, thinking of how these first marks will echo through centuries. From the Olmecs will come the Zapotecs, who will carve entire calendars into stone. The Maya will refine these early symbols into a language of astonishing complexity, writing poems, histories, and prayers that span generations. Even the Aztecs, 1,000 years later, will still echo the Olmec gift, combining image and text into codices that mirror the world itself. It all begins here, with a few uncertain lines carved into green stone. Writing is the Olmec's quietest miracle, and perhaps their most enduring. Afternoon light filters through the trees. You sit again by the water, watching the current flow past, smooth and unbroken. A piece of polished jade lies half buried beside you, its surface etched with a faint spiral. You pick it up and turn it over in your hand. The spiral ends abruptly in a single line, an unfinished thought, maybe, or the earliest signature of an unknown scribe. You wonder who made it, and why. Perhaps it was meant for a ruler's tomb, a message to the ancestors. Perhaps it was practice, a test of hand and patience. Perhaps it was nothing more than a human impulse, to leave a trace. Whatever its purpose, it has done its work. You hold it now, millennia later, the thought of another life pressed into your palm. In that moment, time collapses. The scribe, the ruler, the priest, the world, they are all here, whispering through this small green stone. Evening again. The forest glows with gold and shadow. The air hums with insects, the smell of rain and resin drifting through the trees. You hear the distant sound of drums from another city, La Venta, perhaps, or Tres Zapotes, where priests are beginning their evening rituals. But this time, their prayers are accompanied by writing. Their offerings include words. The gods are no longer only in smoke and song. They are in symbols carved upon the world. You imagine an Olmec ruler standing before a new monument, his name freshly inscribed upon it. He runs his fingers over the grooves, tracing each mark as the priest reads aloud. The sound of his name fills the plaza, mingling with the smoke of incense, the smell of maize and rain. He smiles, not in pride, but in recognition. He knows he has joined the realm of the eternal. The sun sets one last time over the river. The sky burns orange, then fades to violet. Fireflies drift above the water like scattered sparks. You set the jade shard down beside you, returning it to the earth. It belongs here. Everything does. And as you watch the last light fade, you realize that the Olmecs have not vanished at all. Their words still ripple through the world, in the patterns of cities, the calendars of farmers, the myths whispered by stars. They began the long conversation between humanity and eternity. And though the jungle has taken their voices, the stones still speak. The wind stirs again. The river glimmers. Somewhere, in the distance, a conch shell sounds, long and low, summoning people to the next celebration, the next revelation. The age of writing has begun. The age of stars and calendars follows close behind. You rise, stretching your legs, the air cool against your skin. The drums are calling you upstream now, toward new temples built to honor the sun, the moon, and the turning of time. Without looking back, you follow the sound. And so, the story moves forward, unbroken, into Masters of the Sky, where the Olmecs raise their eyes to the heavens, learning to read not only stone, but stars. Let's move onward without breaking the thread. The last light fades from the river. The green stone lies where you placed it, gleaming faintly in the dusk. Overhead, the first stars bloom in the velvet sky, bright, ancient, unblinking. They were always there, of course, but now that the fires of ritual and writing have dimmed, you begin to truly see them. The air cools. The hum of the jungle softens. The drums in the distance slow until they are no more than a heartbeat. And that heartbeat becomes the rhythm of the heavens. You lift your gaze. The night stretches wide above you, the kind of deep black that only exists far from cities and time. The stars are not still. They shimmer and drift, tracing invisible arcs across the heavens. Some rise in the east and fall in the west, steady as breath. Others hover at the edges, moving slower, older. To us, it is simply the sky. To the Olmecs, it was a living text, one that could be read if you had the patience to listen. They were, after all, a people who had learned to carve meaning from silence. From stone, they drew faces. From earth, they raised temples. From sound, they built words. It was only natural that they would next learn to read the light of the gods themselves. Imagine standing here 3,000 years ago. The jungle stretches unbroken to the horizon. The night is clear, the air cool and still. Around you, fires burn in the plazas of La Venta, flickering against the dark bulk of the pyramid. Priests and astronomer priests, the sky watchers, stand upon its summit, eyes fixed upward. They are wrapped in jaguar pelts against the chill, their faces painted with bands of white and black. In their hands they hold not telescopes, but memory, generations of observation, recorded in bone, in bark, in whispered lineage. Above them, Venus burns bright, the morning star, the evening star, the twin soul of the sun. They watch its path across the seasons, noting when it disappears into the glare of the dawn, and when it reemerges. They track the moon's slow cycles, the dance of constellations that mark the passage of time. To them, these movements are not random. They are the breath of the cosmos, the pulse of gods too vast to be seen in any other form. The sky is order made visible. By day, the sun ruled, the eye of the heavens, the heart of fire. By night, the moon and stars took its place, guiding the world through darkness. The Olmecs learned early to follow these rhythms, not for curiosity alone but for survival. The rains came not by chance, but by season. The floods and droughts had patterns. To plant too early or too late was to starve. So the sky became calendar. The stars became timekeepers. The priests became its interpreters. It was they who knew when the sun would rise directly over the sacred pyramid, when the shadow of the mound aligned perfectly with the central avenue, when the heavens told them it was time to sow maize or to harvest. Their temples were not only places of worship, they were instruments of measurement, aligned to celestial events with precision that still astonishes modern scholars. Look at La Venta again. Its axis tilts slightly, 8 degrees west of north. That tilt is not error. It matches the sunset on specific dates, dividing the year into sacred intervals. Even their most ancient settlements, like San Lorenzo, show similar orientations, each one tuned to the rhythm of the sky. They were architects of the cosmos. You walk through one of these sacred plazas. The stones beneath your feet still hold the warmth of the day. The air is full of the soft rustle of palm leaves. From somewhere beyond the mounds you hear the slow trickle of water, a canal catching the reflection of stars. A priest stands nearby, silhouetted against the glow of a small fire. He is old, his back bent, his eyes milky with age. Yet his gaze is fixed upward, steady and knowing. He beckons you closer. In his hand, he holds a small bowl of water. He places it on the ground before you. "Look," he murmurs. You lean over. In the water's surface, the stars shimmer, a mirror of the heavens, still and bright. The old priest traces a finger along the reflection, connecting points of light. The shapes form creatures familiar from the carvings: the jaguar, the serpent, the bird. "The gods above are the same as below," he whispers. "They are our brothers. When the jaguar walks the sky, we know the rains will come. When the serpent coils around the horizon, we prepare for the floods. His voice fades, and you realize he is not just speaking poetry. He is reading the cosmos aloud. This is astronomy before the word existed, a sacred science that blends observation with reverence. The Olmecs did not separate sky from earth. They believed in three realms: the underworld below, the middle world of men, and the upper world of the gods. A ceiba tree, or world tree, stood at the center, its roots in the underworld, its branches touching the stars. To climb the pyramid was to climb that cosmic tree, to move from mortal soil to divine air. Each step upward was a step closer to understanding the structure of the universe. From those heights, the priest could see far, the glimmer of rivers, the dark curve of the horizon, the endless sky arching above. They mapped the sun's path along that horizon, marking it with stones or posts. Over years, then generations, they learned its language. The days when the sun rose farthest north and south, the solstices, became moments of ceremony. Between them, equinoxes marked balance, the breathing in and out of the world. And somewhere within that cycle, they discovered a pattern: 260 days between key sunrises. It matched the time between planting and harvest. It matched the length of a human pregnancy. This, they realized, was not coincidence. It was the measure of life itself. From this revelation, they created something extraordinary: the first Mesoamerican calendar. It was not a calendar as we use the word today, bound to paper or digital screens. It was a living count, kept by priests and marked by ritual. Each day had its sign: jaguar, maize, serpent, wind, rain, death, birth. Each number carried power, each combination unique. Together they wove a cycle that guided not only planting and harvest, but war, birth, prophecy. The Olmecs did not invent this system fully formed, but they laid its foundation, the sacred 260-day count that the Maya and Aztecs would later refine into their magnificent calendar wheels. In their hands, time itself became sacred geometry, turning endlessly like the dance of the heavens. You sit beside the old priest as he draws in the dirt with a stick. He sketches two intersecting circles, one representing the sun's year, 365 days. The other, the sacred count of 260. Where the circles overlap, he taps the center with his finger. Here, he says softly, here is the moment when the two worlds meet. The day when heaven and earth speak. He smiles faintly. We live between those circles. We live in their rhythm. He wipes the design away with his hand. The dust rises, and the stars seem to shimmer brighter in response. To live by the sky was to live in awareness of time's flow, and of one's place within it. For the Olmecs, this was not fatalism but harmony. They saw destiny not as a fixed line, but as a pattern repeating through cycles: birth, death, rebirth, rain, drought, rain again. The sky told them when to act and when to wait, when to give and when to rest. Their rulers, like their priests, were bound by these celestial laws. No king could claim power without the heavens' consent. His coronation had to align with auspicious days. His blood offerings were timed to the movements of Venus or the moon. In this way, astronomy became politics. The sky legitimized rule. And so, the priests of the sun were also the keepers of order. At dawn, the first light breaks across the horizon. The air turns gold, and the stars begin to fade, one by one, swallowed by the growing day. You stand atop the pyramid as the sun's edge appears, a disk of fire emerging from the mist. The old priest raises his hands. The crowd below falls silent. The moment the light touches his skin, the conch shells sound. Drums follow, steady, slow. The people kneel. The ruler, standing beside the priest, lowers his head. This is the sunrise ceremony, the renewal of the world. For the Olmecs, the sun was not just a celestial body, it was the living heart of creation. Each dawn was a rebirth, a triumph of order over chaos. To greet it was to affirm existence itself. You watch as the light spills down the pyramid, striking first the priest, then the ruler, then the plaza. The stones seem to glow from within, as if the city itself is awakening. You feel the warmth on your face. It is the same warmth they felt 3,000 years ago. The same light. The same rhythm. The heavens have not changed, only the eyes that look up. As the day unfolds, you wander through the city. Everywhere you see traces of this cosmic understanding, carvings of suns with radiating lines, masks split between light and shadow, serpents with feathers that represent the joining of earth and sky. You begin to realize that their gods were, in a sense, celestial beings, manifestations of the elements and cycles that governed existence. The rain god was the storm itself. The maize god was the sun's warmth, made visible. The jaguar god was the night sky, fierce and unknowable. When they raised altars or carved faces, they were translating the sky into stone. Their art was astronomy made physical. That night the city gathers again. The priests light fires on the pyramid's terraces. Smoke rises in tall columns, merging with the stars above. The air smells of resin and maize beer. The people sit in silence as the priests begin to tell stories, not written, but spoken, chanted, woven into the rhythm of the drums. These are stories of creation, of the gods who set the stars in motion, of the first dawn when light and darkness agreed to trade places forever. The children listen with wide eyes. The elders nod slowly. Everyone knows these stories by heart, yet they never lose their power. It is not the story that changes, it is the listener. Each retelling renews the bond between people and sky. Much later, when the fires burn low, you look up again. The Milky Way stretches above you like a great river of light. The priests say it is the path of souls, the road the dead travel to reach the realm of the ancestors. You follow its arc with your eyes and imagine those souls moving through it, rulers, farmers, artisans, children, all returning to the stars from which they came. The idea comforts you. The Olmecs did not see death as an ending. It was another cycle, another turning of the wheel. The soul that left the body became rain, light, wind. It would fall again as water, rise again as fire. Even the stars, they said, were the spirits of those who once lived among them. By the time the dawn comes again, the cycle is complete. The city stirs. Smoke curls upward from hearths. Somewhere a child laughs, chasing a parrot through the plaza. Life continues, ordered, rhythmic, eternal. You stand at the edge of the pyramid once more, watching the horizon burn with gold. You think of everything the Olmecs achieved, their art, their gods, their cities, their language. And now, their mastery of time and sky. They were not content merely to live upon the earth. They sought to understand the structure of the universe, to find their reflection in the heavens. And in doing so, they gave us the first whisper of something timeless, that humanity, though small, can read the language of the stars. The sun climbs higher. The air grows warm. The drums begin anew, slow, steady, ancient. You turn toward the sound, following the rhythm back toward the river. The sacred centers are behind you now, but their pulse remains in the earth beneath your feet. The priests will continue to read the sky, their children will learn the cycles, their descendants will carry this knowledge to new lands. Trade routes are already forming. Canoes heavy with jade and obsidian drift along the coast. Messengers walk through the jungles carrying cacao, feathers, stories, and ideas. The sky's rhythm will soon travel with them. And so, as the river widens and the horizon glows, you feel the next movement begin, the flow of goods, symbols, and faith from the heart of Olmen to lands far beyond. The journey is changing shape, but not direction. You follow the sound of distant paddles on the water, the scent of salt in the air. Ahead lies the open gulf, and with it, the wide world. The Olmecs are not only masters of the sky now, they are becoming masters of connection. And thus, without pause, the story moves, smoothly, endlessly, into trade and influence, where the rivers become roads, and the ideas of a people begin to travel farther than they ever could have dreamed. Let's not break the rhythm. The drums are softer now, replaced by the steady whisper of water. The air smells of salt and river mud. The sound of insects has faded, replaced by the croak of seabirds. The world of pyramids and altars lies behind us, its fires still flickering on the horizon. Ahead stretches something wider, more fluid, alive with movement. Canoes glide through the mist, their paddles slicing the river's surface in perfect rhythm. The priests watch the stars, the traders watch the currents. Both are readers of patterns, both keepers of order. You and I drift closer to the tide where rivers meet the sea, and there, on the gleaming waters, begins the next chapter of the Olmec world. The morning breaks clean and silver. The surface of the river shines like hammered metal beneath the rising sun. In the distance, the jungle thins, giving way to stretches of open marshland where the air tastes faintly of the ocean. Canoes move in quiet procession, long, narrow vessels carved from single tree trunks, their hulls dark with sap and salt. Each carries goods wrapped in woven mats, jade from the highlands, obsidian blades sharp as moonlight, bundles of cacao beans, plumes of brilliant quetzal feathers. The men who guide them are bare-chested, their muscles gleaming with sweat, their movements precise and silent. They know this river as well as their own breath, its hidden shallows, its moods, its shifts of current. The river is both road and lifeline, a path connecting the Olmec heartland to the world beyond. It was through these waters that the Olmecs reached out, and through these waters that their influence began to spread. The Gulf Coast, their home, was a world of abundance and challenge. The land was fertile but treacherous, rivers that flooded, jungles that swallowed, storms that came howling from the sea. To survive here required ingenuity, and to thrive, connection. So the Olmecs became masters of movement. From the swamps of San Lorenzo to the ceremonial mounds of La Venta, they built networks of rivers and canals. Canoes slipped through reeds, carrying food, people, and sacred goods between settlements. The coast, once a barrier, became their highway. Their trade routes stretched far beyond what anyone could have imagined. From the volcanic highlands of present-day Guatemala came jade and obsidian. From the valleys of Oaxaca came iron ore mirrors, polished until they reflected the face of the sun. From the distant uplands of Chiapas came feathers, shells, and dyes. And from the Olmec heartland, they sent what others could not create: art, symbols, and belief. You stand on the shore where the river meets the sea. The air is warm, heavy with the scent of brine. Waves roll in with slow grace, each one collapsing against the sand in a sigh. A group of traders gathers near a cluster of reed huts. Their canoes are pulled onto the beach, their goods spread before them. You see carved figurines of jade and serpentine, tiny, luminous faces of rulers and gods. You see masks that glimmer green in the sun, beads polished to glass-like smoothness, and obsidian blades that catch the light like shards of night. Nearby, another group of men, foreigners by their dress and accent, approaches with cautious reverence. They come from inland, perhaps from mountain valleys where the air is thin and the rivers narrow. Their offerings are simple but rare: bundles of cacao, stones flecked with gold, feathers from birds that never fly this far east. The exchange begins with silence. The traders kneel, touch the ground, lift their hands to the sky. Then they speak, not in full sentences, but in a mixture of words and gestures, a ritualized language of commerce and respect. Hands move goods, eyes measure value, and slowly, the transaction unfolds. It is not merely trade. It is communion. The Olmecs understood that exchange was never only material. When two peoples traded goods, they also traded stories, rituals, and gods. Every jade bead that left the Gulf carried with it a fragment of Olmec thought, a symbol, a belief, a way of seeing the world. Over centuries, their influence spread along these rivers like the floodwaters themselves. In distant villages, people began to build small altars shaped like Olmec thrones. They adopted the faces of the jaguar and the rain god, the curving lines of Olmec art, the rhythm of their ceremonies. Even where the Olmecs never ruled, their vision took root. They became, in a sense, the first whisper of a pan-Mesoamerican identity, a network of shared myths and motifs stretching from the Pacific coast to the Central Highlands. When archaeologists later uncovered artifacts hundreds of miles from the Gulf Coast, figurines, jade celts, carved masks, they were finding not the debris of conquest, but the fingerprints of influence. You walk inland now, following a path that cuts through low jungle. The air grows cooler as the ground rises, the light shifting from gold to green beneath the canopy. Along the way, you find traces of this cultural exchange, a small shrine built in the Olmec style, its walls adorned with swirling motifs, a clay vessel decorated with the face of a jaguar, though its maker likely never saw one, fragments of obsidian tools, traded from hand to hand across generations. This is how civilizations grow, not through armies, but through imitation and admiration. The Olmecs did not march across Mesoamerica with soldiers. They traveled in stories, in symbols, in art. Wherever their goods went, their gods followed. You come upon a village near the foot of a mountain. Smoke curls from hearths, mingling with the scent of roasting maize. Children play near the stream, their laughter echoing against the trees. At the center of the village stands a stone stele, a tall, narrow slab carved with the image of a man emerging from a serpent's mouth. It is unmistakably Olmec in style, but the details are different. The face has local features. The headdress bears feathers from birds found only here. The villagers have taken the image and made it their own, merging foreign divinity with native identity. An elder notices your curiosity. He smiles and gestures toward the stele. "This god came from the east," he says in a dialect rough but warm. "He came across the waters long ago. He taught our ancestors how to read the sky and call the rain." He touches his chest. We remember him still. You look again at the carving and realize that influence is not a wave that passes and fades. It is a seed that grows in new soil, changing as it takes root. Back on the coast, the traders prepare for another journey. Their canoes are heavy with obsidian, maize, salt, and dried fish. They wrap each package in woven mats and bind them with reeds. The sea is calm, but the men move with quiet urgency. The horizon is pale and hazy, and storms can rise without warning. The leader, a tall man with jade beads at his throat, kneels beside a small altar on the beach. He places a bit of maize upon it, sprinkles drops of water, and whispers a prayer to the sea god. Only then does he step into the canoe and take his place at the bow. The tide swells, lifting the vessel. With a shout, the paddlers push off, their blades cutting into the surf. The canoes slide forward, rising and falling with the waves. You watch them until they are no more than shadows on the horizon. Some will not return. The sea takes what it wants. But those who do will carry back more than trade goods. They will bring stories, knowledge, and perhaps even strangers who wish to see the land of the great stone heads for themselves. It is easy to think of the Olmecs as isolated, surrounded by swamps and jungle. But in truth, their world was a web of connection, a network of waterways, trade routes, and shared beliefs that linked coast to highland, forest to mountain, people to people. And in that web, they became the center, the mother culture. Their jade was prized across the region, not merely for its beauty but for its meaning. It was the color of life, the symbol of breath and rebirth. When an Olmec trader handed over a jade pendant, he was not giving wealth. He was giving a fragment of the divine. Their obsidian, traded from the highlands, found new purpose in rituals and warfare. Their mirrors, polished from iron ore, captured light so perfectly that they were believed to hold souls. Their art inspired imitations that would one day evolve into the stylized forms of the Maya and the Zapotec. Every exchange, every journey, was a quiet ripple in the vast river of history. You sit by the water as evening falls. The light turns amber, then violet. The tide withdraws, leaving behind a glittering skin of wet sand. You can see the faint tracks of crabs, the smooth impressions of paddles where canoes once launched. You think about how influence works. It begins as movement, small, constant, unseen, and then, without anyone noticing, it reshapes the world. For the Olmecs, trade was not only about material wealth. It was how they spread their worldview, the balance between gods and men, the sacredness of order, the belief that beauty and meaning were the same thing. Through trade, they became more than a people. They became a foundation. Somewhere inland, the drumbeats return, faint, steady, echoing across the hills. You can almost imagine them marking distance rather than time, carrying messages between villages, between worlds. It is night now. The stars shimmer above the dark water, and for a moment, the horizon disappears. Sea and sky become one endless surface. You understand then why the Olmecs saw no boundary between land and heaven, between movement and spirit. Their rivers were the veins of the world, their canoes its pulse. And wherever they went, they left traces of themselves, not through conquest, but through resonance. You imagine their jade beads scattered like seeds, their symbols etched into foreign stone, their gods whispered in new tongues. Even as their own cities would one day fade, their influence would continue to flow, changing shape but never ceasing. The waves lap softly at your feet. The wind shifts, carrying with it the smell of rain and distant earth. Tomorrow, new travelers will set out. New offerings will be made. The cycle continues. But tonight all is still. You look up once more at the stars, the same ones the sky watchers read atop their pyramids. The same constellations that guided canoes across the dark sea. They shimmer like the points of a map, like destinations in a journey without end. And you realize that for the Olmecs, trade was not about possession. It was about participation, becoming part of the great conversation of the world. They did not hoard, they connected. They did not rule, they influenced. Their greatness was not in conquest, but in exchange. The tide rises again. The moon climbs higher. You step back from the water, feeling the sand cool beneath your feet. The jungle behind you rustles softly, alive with the sounds of night. The Olmec traders will travel by moonlight now, their canoes following the silver path across the water. The world sleeps, but their journeys never cease. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the gifts they carry, the jade, the mirrors, the myths, are already weaving new cultures, new stories, new civilizations. You turn inland, back toward the glowing fires of the villages. The scent of maize and smoke drifts on the wind. Somewhere, a priest sings a prayer for safe passage. The sound fades into the rhythm of the waves. You know what comes next. Influence brings connection, and connection brings play, ritual, and meaning. The trade routes will carry not just goods and gods, but games, the sacred contests of rubber and stone that mirror the motion of the cosmos itself. And so, following the current of this unbroken story, you walk toward the distant thump of rubber on stone, toward the echo of cheers and drums and divine motion. The rivers lead you onward, toward the first ball game, where the Olmecs will turn gravity and breath into prayer, and the dance of the heavens into play. Let's move quietly now, away from the sea's whisper, away from the smell of salt and rain. The air grows heavier again, warmer, filled with the pulse of drums. The sound is different this time, faster, taut, electric. The rhythm is not prayer now. It's play. Yet here, in the Olmec world, those two things are never separate. You follow the sound inland through the dim light of dawn. Birds stir in the trees, monkeys chatter, and somewhere ahead you can hear the low murmur of a crowd gathering. The forest opens, and before you lies a long, narrow court of packed clay and stone, flanked by sloping walls. The ground is scarred from use. The air hums with anticipation. This is no ordinary field. This is an altar disguised as an arena. The world's first ball game is about to begin. The court stretches before you like a wound cut through the jungle, 60 paces long, flanked by walls that rise like shoulders from the earth. At each end stand carved markers, their surfaces smoothed by centuries of touch. The floor is hard, reddish clay, polished by countless feet. In the still air, the smell of burning copal mixes with sweat and wet soil. Drums echo from somewhere unseen. You can feel their rhythm in your chest, doom, 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 steady as a heartbeat. Men enter the court, bare-chested, wearing thick leather belts and pads made of woven fiber. Their bodies gleam with oil. Their faces are painted with stripes of black and ochre. They move with the coiled grace of hunters, their eyes focused not on the crowd but on the ball, dark, heavy, and shiny. It is made from the sap of the rubber tree, tapped and cured until it bounces like life itself. When one of the players lifts it and lets it drop, it leaps from the ground as though struck by invisible thunder. The crowd murmurs. The drums quicken. The match begins. The ball is set loose. It strikes the ground, leaps upward, and a player pivots sharply, slamming it with his hip. The ball flies across the court, spinning, alive. Another player meets it midair with his thigh, sending it hurtling back. The impact echoes like stone striking stone. There are no hands here. No feet. Only hips, shoulders, and knees, the sacred points of the body, those closest to the heart and spine. The players twist, crouch, and lunge, their movements fluid yet violent, as if they're reenacting the creation of the world. Because in a sense they are. The Olmecs did not invent this game for amusement. It was ritual, myth, and mathematics fused into motion. Every bounce of the ball symbolized the turning of the sun across the sky, the endless struggle between day and night, life and death. The court itself was the cosmos. The players were gods in disguise. And the ball, heavy, black, alive, was the heart of the universe, forever caught between worlds. The crowd watches in reverent silence. No one cheers, no one shouts. Every motion is sacred. The game is not for entertainment but for balance. A priest stands at the court's edge, chanting softly. He marks the ball's every movement with a word, each syllable echoing like a tally in the heavens. You realize, as you listen, that the ball is more than a symbol, it's a participant. Its motion determines fate. When it bounces high, the crowd exhales in relief. When it hits the ground with a dull thud, the priest frowns. The game's outcome is believed to mirror the god's mood. If the ball keeps moving, the sun will rise again. If it stops, darkness might linger. You look up, and for a moment, you understand why this ritual matters. In a world governed by cycles, of rain and drought, flood and famine, the game offers a glimpse of control. It's a way of negotiating with the cosmos, of reminding the gods that humans still remember their place in the great pattern. To lose is not to fail, it is to accept the balance of life. To win is not to dominate, it is to restore order. The ball game, then, is both contest and communion. A shout breaks through the steady drumbeat. One player dives forward, twisting his body in midair, catching the ball with his hip and sending it hurtling toward the far wall. It strikes a carved stone face embedded near the base and rebounds at a perfect angle. The opposing team scrambles to intercept. Dust rises. The air trembles. The priest lifts his arms, signaling something unseen. The crowd bows their heads. This, you realize, is the climax, the moment when the human and divine worlds touch. The ball, the sun, the heart, all in motion, all in balance. The players circle, panting, waiting for the ball to fall again. It drops, slow as a planet descending through space, and with one final swing of the hip, a player sends it flying through the air, striking the opposite marker. The sound that follows is deep and resonant, like a drum struck by the hand of a god. The game is over. No one claps. No one celebrates. The players bow their heads. The priest kneels, pressing his palms into the dust. For a long moment, nothing moves. Then the crowd begins to hum, a low, vibrating sound that fills the air like wind in the reeds. The players step aside, and from the shadows, the priests approach, carrying bowls of water, incense, and maize. They sprinkle the court with water, purifying it. Smoke rises in slow spirals. The smell is sweet, heavy, timeless. The ball is placed upon an altar of stone at the court's center. The priest whispers a prayer and pours water over it. The steam that rises glows faintly gold in the morning sun. It is a funeral and a birth at once. The heart of the world is being renewed. You walk among the spectators as the ceremony continues. Many wear pendants shaped like tiny balls, carved from jade or obsidian. Some carry small clay figurines of players, their postures frozen mid-motion. These are not toys. They are talismans, symbols of movement, of cosmic rhythm. You realize how deeply the game is woven into their lives. Children play miniature versions in the village squares. Farmers mark the planting season by the outcome of ritual matches. Rulers sponsor great tournaments not for pride, but to align their reigns with celestial favor. The ball game is not only religion, it is the pulse of their society. As the crowd disperses, the players remain behind. They sit at the edge of the court, wiping sweat from their faces, their bodies trembling with exhaustion. One of them, young, broad-shouldered, his chest streaked with clay, looks up at you and smiles faintly. He gestures toward the ball resting on the altar. "It is heavy," he says quietly. "Heavier than it looks. When you strike it wrong, it bruises deep. But when you hit it just right..." He pauses, searching for the word. "It sings." He touches his chest. "And when it sings, the gods listen." You nod, and for the first time you understand. The ball game is not a sport of victory, but of harmony. Its purpose is not to win, but to make the world sing. Later that afternoon, you follow the players beyond the court to a small shrine shaded by ceiba trees. There, offerings are laid, maize, feathers, jade beads, and small drops of blood drawn from the players' forearms. The air hums with cicadas. The priests chant softly, thanking the gods for balance restored. In some eras, perhaps, these ceremonies would demand more, greater offerings, deeper sacrifices. But today, the mood is gentle, reverent. You watch as the players kneel, placing their hands upon the earth. The youngest among them whispers something, a prayer, perhaps, or a promise. His voice is barely audible, but you catch the words. "Let the ball rise again tomorrow." As twilight deepens, you wander through the surrounding village. The people are celebrating quietly, feasting, sharing maize beer, telling stories beneath the trees. At the center of it all sits the same young player, now laughing, his bruises dark against his skin. A child runs up to him, holding a small rubber ball, and he smiles, showing the child how to strike it with his hip. The ball bounces once, twice, before rolling away into the grass. The child giggles and runs after it. You watch them, and it feels like something eternal, the passing of rhythm from one generation to the next. As night falls, the fires around the court are lit once more. The air glows red and gold. The drums return, slower this time, like the fading echo of the day's heartbeat. The priests gather at the altar where the ball still rests. One of them lifts it high, holding it toward the sky. The firelight reflects in its surface. For a moment, it looks like a miniature sun, black and shining, pulsing with power. The crowd kneels. The priest speaks. "The heart of the world still beats. The day will rise again." He places the ball back upon the altar, and the drums fall silent. Above, the stars shimmer. The same stars that guided traders and priests now gaze down upon this court of dust and stone. The people disperse slowly, their footsteps soft, their voices low. The jungle reclaims the silence. You linger. The air is thick and still. The scent of burned incense hangs heavy. You walk to the center of the court and kneel where the ball last struck the earth. The clay is warm beneath your hands. You close your eyes and imagine the game, the sound of the rubber ball, the thud of bodies, the pulse of drums. For a moment, you can almost feel the movement continuing beneath the surface, like a second heartbeat deep in the ground. And then you understand, the game never truly ends. It repeats, endlessly, in ritual, in memory, in myth. Every sunrise is a bounce. Every sunset a return. The Olmecs taught the world how to play with the cosmos itself. In the centuries that followed, their ball game would spread across Mesoamerica, carried by traders and priests, adapted by new cultures. The Maya would build vast stone courts to echo the Olmec design, inscribing the walls with stories of divine players and gods who wagered their lives for light. The Aztecs, too, would inherit the game, turning it into both spectacle and sacrifice. But the heart of it, the movement, the balance, the sound, remains unchanged. It begins here, in the steaming jungles of the Gulf Coast, where the first players struck the first ball and the heavens listened. Dawn again. Mist gathers low over the court, curling like smoke. You stand at the edge, watching the light return, soft and gold. The court is empty now, but the marks remain, the scuffs in the clay, the prints of bare feet, the faint dark stain where incense fell. The air is quiet, but charged. You can almost hear the echo of yesterday's game, the rhythm of hips and drums, the heartbeat of the world. The sun rises over the eastern mound, casting long shadows across the court. For a moment, the shadow's shape looks like a ball in motion, rising, falling, rising again. And then it fades. You turn away, feeling the rhythm still within you. The drums are calling once more, but now their sound is distant, mournful. The age of glory is passing. Something is changing in the heart of Olmen. The fields are drying. The rivers shift. The great centers begin to crumble. The gods grow silent. Without realizing it, you are already walking toward their decline, toward the slow, mysterious twilight of the Olmecs. Let's move carefully now, as though stepping into fog. The air feels different. The warmth of the day has faded, replaced by a stillness too complete, too heavy. The sound of the drums has vanished. Even the jungle seems to hold its breath. The laughter of the children, the thud of the ball, the murmur of trade, all gone. You and I walk together through silence, and that silence is not empty. It is the sound of something ending. The path winds through tall grass and broken stone. The air is thick with the scent of earth after rain, the sweetness of decay. The once bright plazas of La Venta and San Lorenzo lie half-buried now under vines and soil. The mounds that once gleamed red and gold beneath the sun are dark, mottled with moss. Birds nest where priests once stood to greet the dawn. It is difficult to say when the decline began. There is no single moment of catastrophe, no fire or invasion to mark it. Rather, it comes like the slow turning of a season, subtle, relentless, unnoticed until it is too late. The fields, once lush with maize, begin to wither. The rains come too soon, or too late. The rivers shift their courses, abandoning the canals that fed the cities. The people build levees, dig new ditches, pray to the rain god, but the water no longer listens. The ground cracks. The harvests fail. And beneath the surface, other cracks begin to appear. You walk through what was once a market square. Broken pottery lies scattered across the clay floor. A fragment of a jade pendant glints faintly in the mud. The outlines of wooden stalls remain, reduced now to shadows in the earth. Once, this place would have been alive with color and noise, the laughter of traders, the rustle of woven cloth, the calls of merchants offering salt, cacao, feathers. Now there is only the buzz of flies. In one corner, a wall still stands carved with symbols. You brush away the moss and find the faint outline of a face, perhaps a ruler, perhaps a god. The features are eroded, the eyes hollow. Water drips from the stone, tracing lines like tears. It feels less like ruin and more like sleep. As if the city is not dead, only dreaming. The decline of the Olmecs was not a simple collapse. It was a transformation, a slow unweaving of the fabric that had held their world together for centuries. San Lorenzo, their first great city, begins to falter around 900 BC. The canals that once carried water silt up. The terraces erode. The monuments are defaced, not by enemies, but by their own people, as if the power they once celebrated now filled them with unease. Venta rises in its place, shining for a few more centuries, a beacon of continuity and faith. Its great pyramid still draws pilgrims from across the land. But even there, the signs of strain appear. Offerings grow fewer. The altars become simpler. The jade becomes scarce. By 400 BC, the fires in the temples burn lower. The drums slow. The plazas empty. The gods, it seems, have turned their faces away. You pause beside a fallen colossal head. It lies half buried in the soil, its features softened by centuries of rain. A tree has rooted itself beside it, its branches curling around the stone like a lover's arm. Once, this face looked out across a bustling city, its eyes seeing processions, ceremonies, games. Now it watches only the slow growth of vines and the endless passing of clouds. You kneel beside it and rest your hand on the cool stone. The surface is rough, pitted, but beneath the moss you can still feel the marks of tools, the rhythm of human hands that shaped it long ago. Who carved this? Whose face is it? What happened to those who stood before it and called it sacred? The questions echo, unanswered. Some say the decline came from within, that the rulers lost touch with the gods, that greed or arrogance disrupted the sacred balance. Others point to forces beyond their control, floods, droughts, earthquakes, the slow betrayal of the land itself. The truth, perhaps, lies in both. The Olmecs had built their world upon the delicate harmony of nature and faith. When that balance began to falter, when the rains no longer came, when the rivers rebelled, the people must have felt that something fundamental had broken between heaven and earth. The priests bled more often. The offerings grew more desperate. The rituals became longer, darker. But even the most faithful heart cannot rebuild a world that refuses to listen. You can almost see it, the last days of La Venta. The air is heavy with smoke. The temples still stand, but the plaster is cracked. The river runs low, its surface choked with algae. The priests gather before the Great Pyramid, their faces drawn with exhaustion. They offer jade, blood, maize. They burn incense until the air is thick with it, but the sky remains silent. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls, but it brings no rain. At night, people whisper that the gods have abandoned them. The old men speak of strange omens, stars falling, the ground trembling, the cry of unseen beasts in the forest. Children wake crying from dreams they cannot explain. One day, the ruler climbs the steps of the pyramid and looks out over the city. Smoke rises from scattered hearths. The marketplace is nearly empty. The wind carries the smell of rot from the river. He knows what he must do. At the base of the pyramid, the priests gather, holding torches. The ruler raises his hand, and without a word they begin. The altars are dismantled. The sacred stones are buried. Offerings of jade, serpentine, and shell are placed carefully into pits, farewell gifts for the gods who no longer answer. The city is being richly closed. This is not destruction, it is devotion. To abandon the sacred without ceremony would be blasphemy. And so they bury their faith with honor. When they leave quietly. No one burns the temples. No one defaces the pyramid. They simply walk away into the jungle, carrying what they can, whispering prayers to the empty sky. The jungle begins its slow, patient work. Centuries pass. The mounds become hills. The canals turn to swamps. The gods' faces vanish beneath vines. But the people do not disappear, they scatter. The Olmec heartland empties, yet its spirit seeps outward. The farmers, artisans, and priests who once lived here move inland and south, bringing with them their myths, their symbols, their understanding of the sacred world. In the highlands of Chiapas and the valleys of Oaxaca, new cultures begin to rise. You can see the echoes of the Olmecs in their art. The same feline faces, the same spiral motifs, the same fascination with transformation. The Olmecs do not vanish. They dissolve into their descendants. Their end is not extinction, but diffusion. You walk now through the jungle where La Venta once stood. The sun filters through the canopy, casting gold light on the mossy stones. The air hums with insects. Somewhere, a bird calls, its cry sharp and clear. You realize that life has never left this place. It has simply changed form. Beneath your feet, roots thread through old foundations. Lizards bask on the fallen altars. The wind moves through the trees like the breath of something ancient. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the city still breathing. The murmur of water through buried canals, the sigh of wind through hollow stones. Perhaps the Olmecs never truly fell. Perhaps they simply became part of the land itself. The world beyond continues to change. New peoples rise, the Zapotecs, the Maya. They build their own temples, carve their own glyphs, measure their own stars. Yet in every new god, every new myth, you can trace an Olmec shadow. The rain deity reappears, his fanged mouth familiar. The maize god's serene face echoes old jade figurines. The ball courts return, larger, grander, but still aligned with the path of the sun. Even the idea of kingship, of a ruler who is both man and divine, finds its first roots in the swamps of Olmen. The Olmecs are gone, and yet everywhere. Their legacy becomes invisible, like water flowing underground. Night falls over the jungle. You stand atop a lone mound that was once a pyramid, watching the stars emerge. Fireflies blink in the trees. The air is cool, fragrant with the scent of blooming orchids. You look up at the same sky that guided the Olmecs, the same constellations they read, the same moon they followed across the years. For them, the heavens were eternal, even as their world below shifted and vanished. Perhaps that is why they built their monuments from stone, to leave some trace, however faint, of their conversation with eternity. And it worked. Because here you are, millennia later, still hearing their whispers. You kneel and pick up a fragment of pottery from the earth. It is small, curved, the color of faded blood. You brush away the dirt and feel the smoothness of its glaze. On its surface, a faint line remains, a curve that might once have been part of a symbol. It is almost nothing, yet it is enough. You turn it in your hand, and for a moment you see not ruin, but continuity. Every culture that follows, every temple, every calendar, every story, will carry this same impulse, to shape the world into meaning, to find order amid impermanence. The Olmecs taught that lesson first. And though their temples are gone, the idea endures. The jungle deepens. The night grows quiet again. Somewhere, an owl calls. The air feels heavy with the weight of memory. You begin to walk back toward the river, following the faint glimmer of moonlight on water. The path is narrow, overgrown. Every step feels like trespass, every breath a reminder that you walk through the bones of a vanished age. And yet you do not feel sorrow. You feel reverence. Because decline, too, is sacred. It is part of the same rhythm the Olmecs spent their lives trying to understand, the eternal cycle of rise and fall, creation and decay, birth and return. They taught that nothing truly ends. It only changes shape. When you reach the riverbank, dawn is breaking. The sky glows pale gold. Mist curls above the water. You look back one last time toward the buried city. The trees sway gently, as if bowing farewell. The air is filled with the sound of birds calling to the new day. The jungle hums with life. It feels, strangely, like beginning again. And perhaps that is the Olmec's final gift, the understanding that endings are not failures but transformations, that even in silence there is continuity. The colossal heads still lie half buried, their eyes closed, but they are not gone. They are waiting, watching from the edge of time, their gaze fixed on a future they helped create. Their legacy lives in every culture that follows, in every hand that shapes stone or writes a symbol or plants a seed. The gods they worshipped are still with us, in rain, in thunder, in the pulse of the earth. And though the jungle has reclaimed their temples, their story still breathes. You step into your canoe once more. The river's current catches, gentle and slow. The water glimmers with reflected light. Behind you, the Olmec heartland fades into the mist. Ahead, new civilizations wait, new forms, new voices built upon the bones of the old. You feel no sadness now, only calm. The cycle continues. The paddle dips into the water with a soft sound, and the current carries you onward, toward the future, toward inheritance, toward the living echoes of the past. The air grows warmer, the light brighter. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the motion lull you. When you open them again, the world has changed. The river widens into a vast plain dotted with new cities, new temples. And everywhere you look, you see traces of the Olmecs, faces in stone, symbols in jade, echoes of gods reborn. You have arrived at their legacy. We drift onward, you and I, quietly, reverently. The river widens as the morning light spills across it, soft and golden. The air hums with the song of insects, and the distant calls of birds echoing across the marshes. Behind us, the Olmec heartland lies veiled in mist, its pyramids swallowed by green. Ahead, the water glitters like a path into the future. The world is changing again. The great centers have fallen silent, but their spirit, oh, their spirit, moves on. Not in stone, but in memory. Not in cities, but in blood. The canoe slides past tangled reeds, the water whispering against its hull. Each bend of the river reveals a new landscape. Villages rising from the banks, fields of maize shimmering in the sunlight, temples faintly visible through the trees. And yet, everywhere, you see something familiar. A curve in the carving of a serpent's body. A jade pendant shaped like a jaguar's head. A priest's mask with almond eyes and a faint, knowing smile. The Olmecs are gone, yes, but they are also here, reborn in new forms, new tongues, new faiths. Their world has become the seed from which all of Mesoamerica will grow. You pass a small village where children play beside the water. One of them rolls a rubber ball down the bank, laughing as it bounces, heavy and alive. His mother calls to him in a language that is not Olmec, yet echoes its rhythm, its music. Above the village stands a modest shrine. Upon its altar sits a clay figure, half human, half feline, with the same downturned mouth, the same piercing eyes you've seen carved into ancient stone. The woman tending it wears bright feathers in her hair. She sprinkles water over the statue, murmuring a prayer for rain. You watch the droplets slide down the figure's face, glinting like tears. The god has changed names, but not nature. Tlaloc, Chak, Kosijo, all descend from that first spirit of water and storm, the jaguar-faced child of the Olmecs. Everywhere you look, their gods endure, reshaped by new hands, reimagined by new voices, but still pulsing with that same primeval energy. The canoe glides on. The river opens into a wide lagoon fringed with reeds. Across the water rises a settlement of stone houses and step platforms, a place that feels at once new and ancient. Its people call it Monte Alban. They speak a different tongue, carve different signs into their walls, yet their temples align with the sun just as the Olmec pyramids once did. You walk among them, and the sense of familiarity deepens. The plazas are clean and bright. Children chase each other between carved stelae. The smell of maize and roasting cacao fills the air. On one wall, a relief shows a ruler seated upon a throne carved to resemble the open jaws of a jaguar. Beneath him, lines of glyphs record his deeds, his lineage, his divine right to rule. It is the same idea the Olmecs once carved into stone at La Venta, the merging of man and God, ruler and reign, order and life. The language has changed. The art has evolved. But the idea remains. That is their true legacy, not monuments but meanings. You climb the steps of a small pyramid and look out across the valley. The wind moves gently through the maize fields, rustling the leaves like whispers. The mountains beyond are shrouded in haze. You think of the first Olmec priests standing atop their clay pyramids centuries ago, measuring the sun's path, watching the same mountains under the same sky. The continuity feels almost impossible, and yet it is there. Civilizations rise and fall, but the thread of understanding runs unbroken through time. The Maya will soon take that thread and weave it into a tapestry of stars and glyphs, numbers and calendars so precise that they will still confound minds thousands of years later. They will build towering cities that glitter in the jungle like constellations made of stone. But in every line of their writing, every turn of their calendar, the Olmec spark still glows. The ancient rhythm of the sky watchers of La Venta, the first hands that carved meaning from silence. You journey further south now, through dense jungle and rolling plains. The people you meet call themselves Kitch, Itza, Zapotec. Their languages shift, but their hearts beat with familiar rhythm. They tell stories of a time when gods shaped the world from clay and breath. They describe a divine ball game played between the lords of day and night. They paint their temples with the same colors once used in Olmen: red for life, black for death, green for fertility. They wear jade pendants, obsidian blades, and serpentine masks. They bury their dead with mirrors polished to a shine so bright that the soul might see itself reflected as it journeys to the next world. And always, at the heart of their rituals, lies the same truth the Olmecs first learned beside their rivers and swamps, that life and death, creation and destruction, are not opposites, but partners. You arrive one evening at a great plaza lit by torches. The air smells of flowers and smoke. A priest stands before a crowd, his voice steady and solemn. He holds in his hand a jade figurine, a small, perfect sculpture of a human child with a jaguar's face. The people bow as he speaks. "This is the seed of our beginning," he says. "The child of the rain and the earth, the bridge between man and God." He places the figurine in a bowl of water, where it gleams like a living thing. The crowd chants softly, repeating his words. It is an Olmec story, retold in a new tongue. Their myths have survived not through conquest, but through love, through the quiet reverence of generations who felt the same awe before the rain, the same wonder before the sun. Night again. You walk through the jungle beneath a full moon. The air is silver, the ground soft beneath your feet. Fireflies drift through the trees, their light pulsing like slow breath. You think about what it means for a civilization to endure. Not its buildings or its rulers, but its spirit, its way of seeing the world. The Olmecs taught their children that the universe was alive, that every drop of water, every gust of wind, every stone held a soul. They saw no boundary between the sacred and the mundane. That way of thinking has never died. You can still feel it in the Maya temples that rise from the forest canopy, in the Aztec rituals that honor rain and maize, in the songs sung by modern farmers who still bless their fields before planting. The Olmecs whispered the first version of that truth, and it has echoed through every age since. Dawn comes again. The river has grown wide and slow, its banks heavy with blooming lilies. The air smells of sweetness and damp earth. You pass a fisherman casting his net into the shallows. His face, browned by the sun, carries the same features you've seen carved into ancient stone: broad cheekbones, heavy lips, eyes that seem to hold centuries. He hums softly as he works, a tune without words, older than memory. When you ask where he learned it, he shrugs and smiles. "My father taught me." His father before him. You listen closely, and you recognize the rhythm. It is the same pattern the Olmec drummers once played in the plazas of San Lorenzo, slow, cyclical, rising and falling like the tide. It's as though the sound itself has survived, carried not in writing or monument, but in heartbeat and song. Farther along the river, you find a new city rising. Its temples are higher, its plazas broader, its art more intricate. But beneath the surface, you sense the same geometry, the same sacred alignment to sun and star. The architects who design it never saw the Olmec pyramids, yet they build in their image. The sculptors who carve its gods never walked the jungles of the Gulf Coast, yet their chisels repeat the same motions, the same lines. It is as if the stones remember. The Olmecs planted ideas like seeds, ideas of symmetry, duality, reverence. And now, generations later, those seeds have sprouted again, taking root in new soil. Every culture that follows will water them, shaping them into new forms, but the root remains the same. By midday, the sky burns white with heat. You rest beneath the shade of a ceiba tree, the same sacred tree the Olmecs once saw as the axis of the world. Its roots plunge deep into the earth, its branches stretch toward the heavens. The trunk hums faintly with the sound of insects, like the low song of the universe itself. You close your eyes and imagine the Olmec priests standing beneath such a tree centuries ago, their hands raised, their faces turned skyward. They would have felt the same awe you feel now, the sense that life moves in circles, that the past is never truly gone, that memory itself is sacred. You realize that the Olmec legacy is not confined to history, it is a way of existing, a rhythm that continues to beat beneath everything we do. When we plant, when we build, when we look at the stars and wonder, we are repeating their gestures. The day wanes. The river bends once more, and before you, the horizon opens into the wide mouth of the Gulf. The air smells of salt and memory. The sea stretches endless and bright, reflecting the light like a mirror. You pause at the edge of the world and look back. The land behind you glows with the green of jungle and the red of clay, the colors of life and blood. Somewhere, buried beneath that vastness, lie the stones of Venta, San Lorenzo, Tres Zapotes, the old hearts still beating faintly beneath the soil. Their people are gone, their names forgotten, but their dreams live on in every civilization that rose after. The Maya with their star maps, the Zapotecs with their glyphs, the Mexica with their temples of sun and sacrifice. All are children of that first dawn beside the swamp, when the Olmecs looked at the world and decided it was sacred. The tide comes in. Waves lap gently against the shore, glistening in the evening light. You kneel and let the water wash over your hands. It is cool, alive, the same water that once fed the rivers of Olmen. In its reflection, you see the past and the present merging, the old gods with the new, the ancient pyramids rising beneath the outlines of modern cities, the same eternal sky stretching above them all. You whisper a thank you, not just to the Olmecs, but to every forgotten soul who shaped the world through their hands, their faith, their endurance. Because history is not a line. It is a circle. And the circle always leads back here, to the beginning. The sun sets. The sky deepens to gold, then violet, then black. Stars bloom one by one. The wind carries the scent of rain from far inland. Somewhere out there, in the darkness, a storm gathers over the ancient heartland. Lightning flickers, illuminating the distant clouds. You think of the rain god again, his laughter rolling across the heavens. The Olmecs would have smiled at such a sight. They would have seen it as proof that the world still listens, that the old bonds between man and nature have not broken. And perhaps they never will. Because even now, in every storm, in every seed that breaks the soil, in every breath of wind through the ceiba's leaves, the spirit of the Olmecs endures. They are the pulse beneath history, the whisper in the rain, the spark in the stone, the eternal reminder that humanity and the cosmos are one. The waves grow louder, but softer too, like a lullaby, like the breathing of something vast and ancient. You sit beside the shore, your thoughts slow, your heart calm. You have traveled far, from the swamps of San Lorenzo to the stars above La Venta, from ritual to writing, from gods to games, from silence to song. And now, here at the edge of the sea, you understand what they were trying to tell us all along, that nothing truly ends. That every civilization, every life, every story leaves echoes that ripple outward forever. The Olmec's legacy is not carved in stone. It is carved in the rhythm of time itself. The stars shimmer over the sea. The wind sighs through the reeds. The night feels both infinite and intimate, as if the world itself is drawing a long, peaceful breath. You close your eyes, listening to the waves, and feel the story still moving, still flowing toward its quiet conclusion. And so, with the same unbroken motion that has carried us through centuries, we drift gently into the final reflection, into a lost but unforgotten world, where the last echoes of the Olmecs fade into dream, and the story, at last, comes to rest beneath the stars. Let's stay quiet now. The sea breathes in and out beneath the stars, each wave sighing like a memory returning to shore. You can feel the end approaching, not a sharp ending, but a slow, soft descent, like dusk settling over an ancient city. The journey has carried us through temples and jungles, through the laughter of ball games and the silence of ruins, through centuries of rise and fall. But history never ends. It only changes shape. Come, let's walk a little farther along the sand, and listen to the last whispers of a people who have never truly left us. The tide has drawn back, leaving glistening ribbons of foam on the sand. The moon hangs low and full above the horizon, turning the water to silver. The air is warm, fragrant with salt and night-blooming flowers. For a long time, you walk in silence, hearing only the waves and your own breath. Somewhere behind you, the jungle rustles softly. Somewhere beyond, invisible in the dark, lies the buried heart of the Olmec world, its temples, its altars, its colossal heads half swallowed by time. And yet, as you walk, you realize you are not leaving them behind. You are walking with them. Their story lingers in the air, in the rhythm of the waves, in the stars reflected upon the sea. Because nothing truly disappears. Not the gods, not the songs, not the dreams carved into stone. They endure, waiting for those who care enough to listen. You stop and look out across the water. The moon's reflection trembles on the surface like a living thing. Once, long ago, an Olmec priest might have stood on this same shore, watching the same moon. He might have whispered a prayer to the rain god or traced the constellations with his finger, reading their meanings in the dark. He would not have called it astronomy or ritual. It was simply the language of existence, the way one speaks to the world. You realize, standing there, that the distance between you and him is not so vast. You both gaze at the same sky, feel the same wind, wonder at the same mysteries. The centuries are only a breath between heartbeats. The world forgets names, not feelings. The first light of dawn begins to gather, soft and gray. The sky brightens behind the clouds. Birds stir in the trees. The sea turns from silver to gold. You sit upon a smooth rock, watching the day's first color seep into the horizon. The light touches everything, the sand, the waves, the shells scattered along the shore, and for a brief, perfect moment, the world feels whole again. You think of the Olmecs and how their lives must have revolved around moments like this. The daily miracle of light returning after darkness, the reassurance that the world's great cycle continues. Perhaps that was their truest religion, the faith that each dawn is a renewal, that each death contains a seed of birth. The jungle behind you begins to wake. The calls of howler monkeys echo like distant drums. The air grows warm, thick with life. You turn inland, following a narrow path where vines hang low and the ground is soft beneath your feet. The forest hums with invisible motion. You step carefully, aware that beneath every root and fallen leaf lie the bones of old cities. The Olmecs built here once, foundations that now hide beneath the soil, roads swallowed by time. The jungle remembers even when men forget. Its roots trace the outlines of temples. Its streams follow the paths of ancient canals. Everywhere, nature and memory intertwine. The land itself has become the last storyteller. You come upon a mound, nothing remarkable at first glance, just a rise in the earth covered in trees. But when you climb it, your hand brushes against smooth stone. Beneath the moss and roots, you feel the edge of a carving. You wipe away the dirt and find the curve of a mouth, the faint line of an eye. It is one of the great stone heads, fallen, half buried, forgotten. Yet it is still here. You kneel before it. Its face is calm, its lips slightly parted, its gaze turned towards some invisible horizon. The surface is worn by centuries of rain, but the power remains. You feel it in your chest, a quiet, steady pulse, as if the stone itself breathes. You remember the first time you saw one of these faces, rising from the earth like a god awakening. And now, here at the journey's end, you realize that they are not monuments to power, but to memory. Each one is a reminder that time is not destruction. It is preservation in disguise. You rest your palm on the cold stone. The morning sun touches the top of the head, warming it with light. The moss glows green. The shadows retreat. In that moment, the centuries collapse. You can almost hear voices again, the murmur of workers carving, the sound of children laughing nearby, the chanting of priests in the distance. The city comes alive around you for a heartbeat, rising from the jungle like a ghost of itself. Then it fades, leaving only the forest and the sound of wind in the leaves. But something inside you has shifted. You no longer see ruin. You see continuity. The Olmecs are still speaking, but not in words, in symbols, in rhythms, in the deep, quiet language of the earth. As you continue walking, the forest opens into a clearing where sunlight pours down like water. Butterflies drift through the air, their wings flashing gold and blue. The ground is scattered with broken shards of pottery and jade, tiny fragments of what once was. You kneel to pick one up, a sliver of green stone, smooth and perfect despite the centuries. You hold it up to the light, and it glows softly between your fingers. This was once part of an offering, perhaps, a gift to the gods, meant to keep the balance of the world intact. And now, here it is, resting in your hand, its purpose long fulfilled but its beauty undimmed. You realize then that this is what endures, not wealth or empire, but intention. The quiet human wish to honor, to connect, to remember. That is what the Olmecs left behind, not a civilization, but a feeling. You wander onward, following the faint sound of running water. Soon you reach a small stream, its surface dappled with sunlight. You crouch and touch the water. It is cool, fresh, flowing over smooth stones. The same water that once fed the canals of San Lorenzo, that filled the sacred pools of Venta, now flows here, unchanged. The same cycle continues. The same rain falls, the same rivers wind toward the same sea. The Olmecs are not gone. They are part of this endless motion, the breath of the rain, the shimmer of the jade-green water, the pulse of the land. You realize, with a kind of quiet joy, that nothing they built was ever truly lost. The jungle did not erase them. It preserved them in its own way, folding their world into the heartbeat of nature. Time, you think, is not an enemy. It is a keeper. You climb higher into the hills, where the trees thin and the horizon stretches wide. The air is cooler here, cleaner. From the ridge, you can see far across the landscape. The winding rivers, the shimmer of lagoons, the faint blue of the sea in the distance. Somewhere out there lie the buried cities. You imagine them not as ruins, but as seeds, dormant, waiting for the right moment to speak again. And perhaps, in a way, they already have. The archaeologists who uncovered them were not the first to hear their call. The farmers who stumbled upon strange stones, the children who found faces in the mud, these were the first rediscoverers. Each one, unknowingly, became part of the story's continuation. The Olmecs whisper through all who find them, through all who wonder. Even you. You sit on the ridge as the sun climbs higher. The day hums with life. Insects buzz. Birds wheel through the sky. The scent of warm earth fills the air. It is peaceful here, ancient, enduring. You close your eyes, and for a moment you feel the presence of those who came before. The artisans who shaped stone with nothing but patience and will. The priests who watched the stars. The mothers who whispered lullabies beside their hearths. the children who laughed as they chased rubber balls through the dust. Their world is gone, but their humanity remains. You can still feel it, the same hope, the same fear, the same desire to make meaning from the vastness of existence. That is the great truth of history. The farther you travel back, the more you find yourself. The afternoon light turns golden. Shadows stretch across the land. You begin your descent, following the trail back toward the sea. Each step feels lighter, as though the weight of centuries has lifted. By the time you reach the water again, the tide has returned. The waves roll gently over the sand, erasing your footprints as quickly as you make them. The horizon glows with the color of molten amber. You sit once more at the edge of the surf, watching the sun sink into the water. The sea murmurs, the wind stirs, and the sky shifts from gold to red to purple. It feels like an ending, but also a beginning, as all endings do. You remember the journey. The first humid dawn in the jungle, the colossal head staring through the mist, the rise of cities, the chants of priests, the gleam of jade. The laughter of traders, the rhythm of the ball game, the long silence of decline, the soft rebirth of legacy. It all feels like one long breath, inhaled at the beginning of time and exhaled here, at the edge of eternity. The Olmecs are gone, yes, but they never vanished. They live in the curves of rivers, in the tilt of temples, in the eyes of those who still gaze at the sky and ask why. They are in every gesture of reverence, in every spark of creation, in every dream that refuses to die. The stars appear again, one by one. The sea darkens, the horizon fades. You can almost hear the whisper of ancient voices in the wind, soft, rhythmic, like waves against stone. You close your eyes and listen. They say, "Remember us not for our power, but for our wonder. Remember us not for what we built, but for what we believed. Remember that we, too, looked at the stars and dreamed." Their words fade, carried away by the wind, but their meaning remains. The past is not gone. It is merely sleeping. And when we remember, we wake it. The night deepens. The moon climbs high, bright and watchful. The waves whisper softly around you, rising and falling like breath. You feel the rhythm of the world slowing, steadying, settling into stillness. And so, as all stories must, this one comes gently to rest, not with an ending, but with a return. You look out across the water, and for a final time, imagine the first dawn of the Olmec world, the mist lifting from the swamps, the sound of drums echoing through the jungle, the glint of jade in the morning light. They rise again in your mind, not as ghosts, but as guides. Builders, dreamers, watchers of stars. Their hearts still beating beneath the earth, their eyes still open in stone. You smile. Because you know now that they are not lost, only waiting to be remembered. And so, as the night settles, may these echoes of the past guide you gently into dreams, where colossal heads gaze through the mist, where rivers whisper in forgotten tongues, and where, in the hush between waves, the first people of the Americas still breathe, their hearts as vast and eternal as the stars above.